Yes, thank you.
Great. The CalSTRS board meetings are live web streamed, video archived, and available to the public on calstrs.com. Individuals who wish to address the board will be given an opportunity to speak during the 10-minute public comment period at the end of each agenda item. For comments not pertaining to a specific agenda item, there will be an opportunity for additional statements at the end of the open session. Each speaker is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes to comment. However, if there is not enough time for each speaker to have 3 minutes, the timing will be at the discretion of the chair. To protect the privacy of speakers under the age of 18 who wish to address the board, only their first name and affiliated organization may be provided, but other personal identifying information such as their last name, age, or school may not be shared. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. So just a couple of housekeeping reminders as we begin. First of all, on behalf of the board, welcome. It's really great to be back in our boardroom and meeting in person. We've all been through so much, and we continue to be, but here we are, and what a journey it's been. I'm joyful to be back with my colleagues, with our wonderful staff, and really being present to being back together. We've all been through so much. And it's great to be here, and no one's missed a beat serving our members and making sure the pension promise is met and kept. And we're on this road, and that road has brought us back to this boardroom today, so it's wonderful to be here. Our meeting is being live streamed on calstrs.com. While face coverings are no longer required, please give each other space. The overflow room across the hall is open and streaming the board meeting. So that's off here to my left, your right. Restrooms are out the door and to the left, my left, your right. Another set of restrooms are off the main lobby, directly across from the elevators by the parking garage, so right off the main entrance of the building. Attendance sign-in sheets as well as public comment request forms are on the table in the back of the room. For those interested in offering public comment, please give your completed request forms to Diane Stanton, seated in the back. Diane, are you back there? She will be. There she is. There she is.
Next to you.
Thanks, Diane. There she is, next to the table. During public comment, there will be a timer running on the screen. Please respect the time limit set for individual comments. Also, pre-recorded audios or videos are not allowed during individual comments. And lastly, the cafe is open. The cafe, we'll eat. If nothing else, we'll eat. Lunch is available from 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. and coffee is available until 2 p.m. So those are the housekeeping announcements. You know, one of the C's that we're trying to embrace as an organization, as a board, is change and have a change mindset. And sitting here today, our board, the makeup of our board is changing and has changed. To that note, I want to, on behalf of the board, although she's not here, I'm going to thank Ms. Joy Heeger for her incredible service to the board. Hopefully she's not watching or listening, but I would like the minutes to reflect our gratitude and appreciation, our love and admiration, and we will miss her. So as one board member has left, serving on the board and serving the members of CalSTRS, Governor Newsom has appointed Mr. Michael Gunning, I believe is the pronunciation of his name. I had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Gunning, and I know he'll be a terrific addition to our board. And we thank the governor for his appointment and prompt appointment. And Mr. Gunning will be joining us in July. So again, Mr. Gunning, I hope you're not listening. He assured me he wouldn't be, but I'd like the minutes to reflect that we welcome him and look forward to partnering with him in serving the mission and purpose of our fund. So with that, I'd entertain a motion to approve today's agenda.
Move to approve.
I'm going to approve it with flexibility.
Okay, moved with some flexibility. We always like flexibility. So it's been moved to approve today's agenda with some flexibility. Without objection, the agenda has been approved. Okay. Brings us right to our CEO's report, Cassandra Licknock.
Thank you.
Cassandra, good morning.
Good morning, Chair Keeley. We had the content of the report, obviously, within the material itself, and we're just going to do a verbal report on 2 items, and I'm going to hand it immediately over to Lisa to discuss the progress on the headquarters expansion and the leasing occupancy status as well. So we'll start off with that. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Cassandra. So it's been a while since we've all been together in the boardroom, and I hope that as you drove in today that you saw the amazing progress that has gone on in the construction of our headquarters expansion. From every angle, I think it really complements our existing building, and it really looks as if we've designed it at the same time, even though we designed them 10 years apart. So we're really thrilled with the result. Many of you will be taking a tour today, so you can see some of the progress up close and personal. So I'm excited for you to be able to do that for those of you that were interested. The one thing that you don't see in the skyline is the tower crane, and that's because it's been dismantled. It was dismantled 2 weeks ago, and that really signals that the exterior of the building has been buttoned up, and really the focus now is on the interiors or the tenant improvements. Construction activities completed include 3rd and 4th floor wall framing, emergency power reconfiguration, the roof and the skylight and the atrium is complete, and the first round of water testing of the curtain wall exterior has been complete and passed, which is great news. So from a scope perspective, I will tell you that the project is really, really stable. And 4 years ago when we designed the building, with some very few exceptions, we're getting what we designed. The construction is coming to fruition and the building is going to meet all of our needs. So that's a really good positive. From a schedule perspective, the schedule has slipped by about 6 weeks. In addition to a shortage of skilled workers in certain construction trades, DPR has had a long learning curve to understand the number of steps required in the quality control and inspection process required by the Office of the State Fire Marshal. Remember when we hired DPR, we hired them because they had really good sustainability experience in construction. They didn't have any experience in California projects where the State Fire Marshal had jurisdiction over the project. So it's been a learning curve because there is some extra inspections that are required when you go through the Office of the State Fire Marshal. So when DPR put together the master schedule to achieve the January 31st date, they did not identify, in some instances, all of the steps as individual activities in the schedule. And so they didn't identify the number of inspections that are going to be required for every aspect of the project. And because of that, that's why the project has extended. Once this was corrected in the master schedule, the most impactful change related to that was the main elevator shaft. This item is critical, obviously, as it needs to be used for vertical transportation of materials and people during the rest of the construction, while the temporary man lifts are removed and the exterior skin in those locations are buttoned up. Due to the extended duration of this sequence, all of the subsequent activities were pushed out. So it looks like it's the end of March when the construction will be completed. To mitigate any further risk and to help improve productivity, the Office of the State Fire Marshal has committed to increasing their days on site from 2 to 4 or 5 if necessary. So they're really, really working with us. And some crews are working 10-hour days to make sure that they can make up some of the time. So we're looking for recovery days to the best that we can. The Fire Marshal's also allowing some small adjustments in construction along the way that can save a couple of days. There was just one this week where there was a decision made that saved 3 days on the schedule. So every little bit's going to help, and we're going to look for opportunities along the way to make those shifts and changes. And also daily meetings are being held at the end of each day to ensure that the expected progress that day on the schedule has been made. And if not, there's escalation points and mitigation is immediate. So we're really working with the contractor really hard to make sure that that this change to the schedule is the last one, and we have processes in place to ensure that. From a budget perspective, although the schedule slipped a bit, the budget to complete the project has remained solid. We don't have any concerns that the amount of money the board approved in January is not enough. And so that's a really good sign. So budget's intact and remains solid. I wanted to give you some good news on the leasing front. I know we're all anxious about our ability to lease our building because so much has happened over the last 2.5 years, and what we thought would be an automatic isn't an automatic. And we've got to, there's a risk that we wouldn't be able to lease our building. But there's some really good progress and the markets are starting to move. So I want to share that with you. So currently JLL is tracking 14 active tenants looking for office space, and they range in size from 5,000 square feet up to 50,000 square feet. And what I'm really excited about is there's 3 state requirements, which none of us expected because the state has built some beautiful buildings and they're consolidating a lot of their leases. And so to see a state requirement on the market is really exciting for us for a couple of different reasons. For one, our building aligns so perfectly with what they are looking for. Obviously, state agencies run the same. The ratio to open office and private office is the same, and we're going to be leaving our furniture. So that's a huge plus for any state tenant. I'm really excited. 2 of them, one of them is Victims Compensation and Government Claims Board. The other is Department of Managed Healthcare. And the third one is Department of Insurance. So we've put our bid in for all 3 of those requirements. We're actually going to do a tour of Department of Insurance through the building on May 9th. And they're looking for 50,000 square feet. That's 2 full floors of our space. So that's super, super good news. In addition to the active tenants, JLL is also following a list of prospective tenants who haven't quite decided, companies that haven't decided in downtown Sacramento what they're going to do with their staff yet, and they're in short-term leases. So we'll be sure to follow up on those too as those become more active. And I wanted just to make sure that you understood that JLL is doing everything in their power to lease our building. So I wanted to make sure you knew the activities that they're going through on a weekly basis to make sure that our building is front and center. They use CoStar and LoopNet, which are the databases that all brokers and some tenants use. Anyone can search with requirement criteria on square footage and location, and the database will provide available real estate. And so linked to this database is a brochure of our building, floor plans, and all of our marketing materials that really highlight our sustainability attributes, as well as the amenities in our building. And there's also a link to a web page where they can actually do a fly-through of our building in real time. So our building is front and center when people are out there looking for space. JLL also sends out regular email blasts to all of the local brokers as well as the Bay Area brokers. And they're following up with tenants in downtown Sacramento who have leases that expire in the same timing that our space is going to be available, to make sure that if they're not happy where they're at, that there's another available space for them to go to. So I think that is all super good news. And in addition, with all of the state requirements that are on the market, we're networking. We're doing our due diligence. We've worked with Department of Finance. Jennifer Whitaker gave me a contact at DGS who I've known and I kind of forgot about. He called me right back and said, we're on their radar, and I told him we could be flexible. So if the timing of our leases don't align with when the building's done, that's okay. We could figure it out. We were able to remote work over the last 2.5 years. We can make it work. We're not gonna put any roadblocks in finding someone that can lease our space. So I want to make sure you know that we're committed to that as well. And that's all I have for you. If you have any questions.
Ms. Hendricks?
Lisa, I was just curious, what's the length of lease time that we're looking at for some of these partners?
Yeah, so we have the ability, based on our growth projections, to be able to lease for a 10-year period for some floors. So we can offer a really long-term lease. What we're trying to do is make sure that the floor 11 is probably the floor that we'll have the shortest term lease on. And that's because that's the eventual floor that investments will grow into as they grow, because they're taking over 15, 14, and 12. And as they continue to grow, it makes sense for 11 to be available for them. So we're really making sure that we're timing the lease options for the different floors specifically for our own growth. But yeah, we could entertain 3 or 4 floors at a 10-year lease.
Ms. Miller?
Thank you. I think, and I just wanted to welcome our teachers in the audience. Mr. Chair, I was super excited about that, so thank you guys for being here. So just 2 quick questions on the delay date. Obviously, how you're thinking by the end of March is the latest? Okay.
That's right.
So I do think that's just an important piece to just keep us informed of, and all the I understand all the reasons for the delay, and all the ways you're mitigating it. So really appreciate those daily meetings. And but I think I do want to be mindful that the contractor's been at this for a long time, so we should be beyond the learning curve stage. So just making sure we're clear on
agree.
that. So,
David and Michelle are in the audience,
yeah.
they agree.
Okay. So I think super excited for this to be done. Thank you for all your work. I know how hard it's been, but I also want to make sure we're kind of past all the different sort of reasons that this won't be completed. Thank you. And then just in terms of any type of, I know we talked in the past and in the CEO report, there's a piece on savings that we incurred in the project contingency, increasing from 6.4 that you reported in March 22 and 9.7 in this agenda item. I think that is just sort of the growing budget, but could you just clarify the money changes in there that's in the report, or you can get back to us on that. But I just want to make sure we're kind of clear on that growing amount. I know we have a total amount, but the report talks about 6.4 million in March 22 and then 9.7 in this agenda item. I think it's all just part of the total we approved in January, but if we could just get kind of a precise reporting on how that's growing and how much of that, once we go out to sell the bonds, how much of that we'll be spending.
Yeah, we'll definitely
Does
do
that
that
make
for you.
sense?
Now, or do you want to include that in the report?
Okay,
Yeah, we'll
perfect.
record it.
Yeah,
We'll
thank you.
include it in the next
Thank you. And
report.
I know that, and then before we sell the bonds, I know we'll kind of have the total amount, right? Is that right, Julie? Ms. Underwood? That we'll have the complete amount necessary before we go out to sale of the bonds. Is that how?
So Julie Underwood, Chief Financial Officer.
Morning, Julie.
So when we go to issue the bonds, we will wait until substantial completion so that we know exactly how much money we needed. So we asked the board for 18.5. We know we can offset that by 2 million for the savings that we've got, or the extra investment money that we've been investing the current bond money in. So that gets us down to 16.5, but maybe we only need 14 million. So that's when we'll go and issue the bonds for the exact amount we need.
Got it. And then you'll just let us know sort of what the offset is and the savings and.
You mean the gap
Before-
between?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, we plan on doing that at a future board meeting.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank
before
you.
we issue.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Ms. Underwood. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Pillow. Thanks, Ms. Underwood. Ms. Paquin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I'm sorry, Julie, I had a follow-up question for you. Sorry. I was just curious at what point, so if the project costs are now 14 million and they might come down a little bit more than that, at what point does it not make sense to sell additional bonds?
Yes, and we are having monthly meetings with the STO's office and our municipal advisor to talk about that and many other issues, especially with the market volatility, to say, does it still make sense to wait till substantial completion, do it early? Or if we do get to the end and we only need $5 million, does that still make sense? And that's something we will discuss with the board at that time.
Okay, I think I would appreciate that. I think with the rising interest rates and then the cost of issuance, there might be a point where it just doesn't make any sense to issue additional bonds.
Yes.
Okay,
Agreed.
thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Ms. Paquin. Ms. Jordan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a request, and thank you to all for the very hard work that has gotten us to this point where we are now. As we go forward with regard to the leasing assessment, if you could also keep us posted at what point, it's still quite a forward commitment, so at what point are we in the deeper part of the potential market, and if we're seeing deals done to other buildings, if there's any findings that are material as well. Thank you.
Don't see any other board members with questions, and I'm confident that the staff is speaking with our folks in fixed income and speaking with Mike DeRay and his team in real estate, and picking up as much insight and suggestions and recommendations that would be prudent and wise. So thank you for that. So back to you. Anything else in your report that you can bring?
I did want to mention.
Oh, I apologize,
Yeah.
Ms. Licknock. I do see Mr. Johnson is in the queue. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Chair. A little last minute with the decision on the question.
All right. Caught you. Gotcha.
Thanks, Lisa, for the presentation. Quick question regarding the delay to April 2023. So DPR stated that there's going to be a delay due to like a labor shortage. I mean, I know that you guys had a record labor shortage of 11.5 million. Assuming the shortage gets worse, is that already contingent in terms of this 6-day work week and 10-hour work days?
Yeah, so there's still some contingency in the schedule, even with it being pushed out to the end of March. We left contingency in the schedule because we needed that for that reason. We are working crews 6 days a week and then 10 hours a day. So to the point that we feel like we need more manpower, we've got that contingency in the schedule if it does slip anymore.
Okay, thank you.
No other board members in the queue?
All right, thank you, Chair Keeley. I did want to acknowledge a departure from a retirement of a very senior level leader in the organization and an important participant in our organization, Larry Jensen. Larry has announced his retirement at the end of July. I think he's leaving. It's fluctuated because we've talked him into staying as we go through the transition, so I appreciate that.
Talk to his wife.
Yeah, they might not know this. They have plans. Larry joined CalSTRS in 2014 following 19 years of work at CalPERS, where he served as the Chief Risk Officer from 2010 to 2014, and he was the Chief Auditor over there prior to that position. During his time at CalSTRS, he has really been a champion of advancing and improving upon the audit work in our audits office. He's really focused on developing staff and grooming those in preparation for succession behind him and the transitions that have been going on through retirements that we've been seeing throughout the organization and in audits. He worked to align the internal audit program to assist in achieving our strategic goals. He's focused on improving the program to align with the standards for professional practices of internal audits. And in 2021, the Institute of Internal Audits gave CalSTRS Office of Audit Services the highest rating available for meeting professional standards. CalSTRS also was able to advance our enterprise compliance services program under his leadership. And it has really gotten to the point where we are not necessarily fully mature in that area, but we are in a really good place to continue work in the compliance program as that program transitions into our Chief Financial Officer's oversight. And it's because of Larry and his work that he did that. Larry's colleagues praise him for his positive attitude and his commitment to ethics, teamwork, and working with our stakeholders. He's always willing and participates on a regular basis when asked to meet with stakeholders and explaining the very complex details of audits if necessary. And I know that Dr. Yetman wanted to make some comments, so here he is for his comments on Larry.
Thank you, ma'am, CEO.
That's a new comment that we want to make sure that we get past.
Good morning, Teachers Retirement Board. It is a pleasure to be here with you. For those of you who I've not had the chance to meet yet, I am your Audits and Risk Management outside external consultant. I work for you, and I'm also a teacher, Ms. Miller. Thank you. So I just wanted to say a very short few words about Larry. I've worked with Larry now since 2014 when he was hired on July 1st. And I remember that quite well because I was part of the process that interviewing the candidates that hired Larry. And it became rapidly clear to those of us engaged in that process that Larry was the right person for this job. And but little did we know back then how really right we were. Since taking over the role of Chief Auditor, Larry has been a stabilizing force and has brought the highest level of professionalism to the audit department. His competence and his leadership transformed the audit department into a high-quality shop of sharp-eyed auditors. Larry's very calm demeanor, for those of us who have worked with him, he is the perfect gentleman. And his calm demeanor and his warm manner are quite disarming. However, those within the organization quickly learned that underneath that charming smile was a rigorous and skilled auditor. The organization came to know Larry not as a watchdog in the search of flaws, but rather as a partner who worked within the organization to improve all facets of reporting and operations through cooperation and understanding. Larry, you've taught me a great deal over the last 8 years, more than you probably know. Composure. It has been an honor to work with you. I wish you nothing but the best in your well-deserved future. Thank you for your service.
Beautiful.
No sailing.
Not yet, Larry. I think Ms. Paquin has a few words. Paquin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Larry, on behalf of Controller Yee, we just can't thank you enough for all the service and the work and the dedication that you put into your role here at CalSTRS. And just looking at the change with the employer audits, moving to the limited scope audits, and really taking the attitude of, doing those and then helping the employers to fix the issues and kind of learn and move on. Really appreciate that. And your work with the internal audits as well, too. And, such a positive approach that you brought to your work. And as Dr. Yetman said, with this approach of just wanting to continuously improve and do right by the organization and the people and the members. So we can't thank you enough for all of your work, and of course, you work with the compliance office as well, helping to stand that up. It's been amazing working with you. We will greatly, greatly miss you and wish you all the best in your retirement. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It's rare, but nothing else needs to be said, Larry. Dr. Yetman said it. Ms. Paquin said it. Would you like to take a moment or two to say anything to us, to the board, to the organization? Because we won't, don't think we'll see you in, I'm not sure if we'll see you. Thank you.
I didn't plan on saying anything today, but on the way in this morning, I was thinking that, I reported to a board for nearly 25 years in my career, and I have to say, this is the best board that I've really enjoyed working with the most out of all of those years. In part because one is your solid governance policies, also because of your collaboration and your cohesiveness as a board is terrific. And most importantly, your laser focus on serving the members and accomplishing the mission of CalSTRS. So thank you. It's been a wonderful opportunity to work with you, to work with our executive team who shares that same vision and mission with the board, and to all of our executive team that I've had a chance to work with, and just everybody in the organization. And I have to say that, primarily our staff and audit services, I can't do that work by myself, of course, and we do have, I believe, in my opinion at least, the best employer audit team in the nation among public pension systems. I've talked to all of them. And so I just want to say that they're terrific teams, and our internal audit team is forming so nicely, and they're highly skilled, and they're really here to help the organization accomplish the mission and safely, and so that risk is managed, within an acceptable level. And it's just been great. Also, if you don't mind, personal moment. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't thank my wife. You're crying, and it makes me.
I'm telling Dana.
Sharon and I have been married for over 30 years, and she has supported me. I look forward to spending more time with her and with the family. And she's going to keep me busy. She already has a page and a half of projects that are prioritized, and it's on a checklist that says, like planned, materials purchased, in progress, complete.
I love your wife.
She said that if I'm looking for a meeting, I can always have a status meeting with her and on the projects. And so we look forward to that. She also has several trips for us planned between now and the end of the year, and some big ones for next year. So we're just going to have a great time with the family and the grandkids, and see what happens from there. So thank you very much. Appreciate the time and the personal moment there. And thank you for everything that you've given me and the growth that I've been able to enjoy.
Larry, thanks so much. It was a hug from a distance, buddy. God bless you, and wishing you and your wife good health.
He showed me the card
Thank
in
you
his
so much.
pocket that his wife, there's Alaska, Hawaii, Florida. Florida's in there a couple times, so it's, I mean, the next 6 months of travel, so. I love your wife, she's very focused, I appreciate that. Keeps them.
Kids are in Florida, right? That's why they're going there.
Thanks.
Lovely.
Anything else?
Nothing else on the CEO report.
Great. So which brings us to item 2 on the, is it item 2 or 3? Item, public comments. Are there public comments for item 2? I think there are.
Person for public comments.
There's that.
If we could get a 3-minute timer, please?
Clock to come on here. Good morning, board members. My name is Kevin Welch. I'm the chair of the California Teachers Association, and I'm the retirement committee. I'm very, very happy to be here with you today here in Sacramento. CTA would like to congratulate Larry Jensen on your retirement. And thank you for your years of service to California, to the community, to CalSTRS. We know that as chief auditor for CalSTRS, you played a significant role in helping to maintain the long-term sustainability of the fund and ensure accurate retirement benefits for the more than 900,000 members who benefit from this organization. So thank you very much, and wonderful retirement to you and to your family.
Thanks very much, Mr. Welch. Any other public comments?
That is the last public comment for item 2.
Okay, thank you. Item 3.
Thank you, Chair Keeley. This is the annual board chair and vice chair elections, and this is the first time I've done this, so I'm going to, I think I know the process well enough to ask for any nominations for the board chair. Do we have any nominations?
Okay. Ms. Bradford?
I'd like to nominate Harry Keeley for board chair.
Okay.
Second.
Okay.
Oh, that's the second.
Second.
We're all trying to make the buttons work. And then we ask for any comments, any other nominations? Okay, the nominations.
I think Ms. Cassandra's going to run this. I think I'll stay out of it.
I just, and I hope I'll speak maybe on behalf of the chair and vice chair, but I do think this has been an extraordinarily challenging 2 years, and I think we've all been tested, and certainly leadership has, and I think being able to lead during times of turmoil and change has been really impressive, and it's been a pleasure, just a pleasure to be able to be a part of this team and just see you staying grounded in what really matters, and it's a true inspiration. So it is a pleasure to second this nomination.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. With that, we'd take a vote, correct? Okay, so is it a roll call vote, or all those in favor say aye?
Yeah.
Perfect, okay. All those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Chair Keeley, you are going to continue to stay chair. Congratulations. For the vice chair.
And Ms. Bradford, Denise, Ms. Bradford?
I'd like to nominate Sharon Hendricks for vice chair.
Second.
Okay, there's been a nomination for Sharon Hendricks as vice chair and a second to that nomination. Any other nominations? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, congratulations, vice chair. Thank you.
We're all set for another year.
Fun and games.
Yeah. I do want to thank the board for the confidence. It's an honor to be of service to our members. I'm humbled by the responsibility, and I'm eternally grateful for the opportunity to be of service and focused on our mission and purpose. And I couldn't ask for a better vice chair. Sharon is terrific. We're so aligned on so many issues, on values, on purpose, on mission. She's always there to support me. We've developed a great friendship and relationship over the last couple of years, walking the beach in Santa Monica, hiking in Los Angeles, and thinking about all things CalSTRS. So it's great to be in partnership with Sharon for another year. So thanks very much, everyone. Okay, so we will go right to item 4, which are the actuarial valuations, and we've got a whole team coming up. So just
Nice transition.
in terms of a time check, I think what we'll probably do, because there are several items that are here for approval, the first of which is we have 40 minutes allocated for that. I think what we'll do after the first one, the 40-minute one, we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and finish the other ones. Okay?
All right, thank you,
Good morning.
Chair Keeley. Good morning. Good morning, members of the board.
morning.
Congratulations again to the chair and vice chair on being reelected. So
Thank you.
we're back after, it's been 3 years since we presented a valuation in person, I believe. So it's good to be back again. And we're here again to summarize the valuation completed as of June 30th, 2021. So it's more than a summary. So when we do evaluation, we also look at everything to make sure that we're still on track for our goal, which is to full funding by 2046. And so when we present these results, you'll see the results, and I'll turn it over to David, and then we have Nick and Scott here to help it. But we will be looking at to make sure that we're still on track and that we don't have to take any other deviations or do anything else necessary to reach full funding by 2046. So keep that in mind. We're going to be very brief in our summaries, but if you have any questions or any comments or you want to talk to any of us, please feel free to do so. So we'll do that also. So with that, I'm going to introduce, so we have Nick Collier from Milliman and Scott Peppernew from Milliman. Scott, this is Scott's first meeting. Mark Allman retired to skiing. And so Scott is here with Nick, and they're going to also, comment on that. So feel free to ask them any questions also. And then I'm going to hand it over to David for further comments.
And just so this is item 4. We have 4A, 4B, and 4C. And as Mr. Chair said, we'll do 4A first. We'll vote on it, then we'll do 4B, 4C, and then we'll take a break. So I'll pass it over to Nick and Scott first so they can go over the result of the evaluation, and I'll end after that with a few comments before we move on to our actions.
Thanks, David. As Rick said, the purpose of the valuation is to monitor the funding plan, make sure you're hitting your target. And additionally, also one of the key things is the valuation assists the board in exercising its limited rate setting authority. I'd mentioned that we also, in addition to this presentation, we have our formal evaluation report that's attached to this agenda item. We like to think it has a lot of enlightening analysis and informative graphs, and of course it has a whole bunch of numbers to satisfy our actuaries. But anyway, if that's maybe a worthwhile read for those of you who are suffering from insomnia, but actually the executive summary is pretty good. So just talking about some of the significant events that happened since the last valuation, obviously the headliner is the 27.2% investment return, and that's really, again, you're going to see that throughout the valuation results. It's obviously had a very positive impact. Just remember that we use actuarial smoothing, so we recognize 1/3 of the gain in this valuation. So we're deferring some good news, and we'll look at that on a later slide, how that could potentially flow through. And the second thing is, remember when we talk about it, when we actuaries view an investment gain, that's beating our target assumption of 7%. So that's really the big story, but just the other things that happened, obviously the state made additional contributions again, had a positive impact, so that's always nice to see. Back in January, you had an update to your valuation policy. I don't think that really affected the valuation too much. One potential impact is there was a limitation put on the state contribution rate. Originally, it was limited going up 0.5% of pay, but no limit on going down, and now there's a limit of the state supplemental rate going down 0.5% of pay. We also observed a significant drop in the active number of teachers. That dropped by about 5%. Lastly, one thing you don't see here is COVID. We kind of reviewed that, but we really don't see much of a direct impact on any of the kind of evaluation results, although indirectly that definitely could have affected the decline in the active membership. So moving on to the next slide. Okay, so as Rick said, we're kind of monitoring the financial health of CalSTRS. The key measurement we use for the current health is the funded ratio. I think as most of you are aware, the funded ratio is the ratio of the assets you have on hand. And once again, this is the smoothed assets that I just talked about divided by the value of benefits that are earned as of the valuation date. So as you can see in the last valuation, it was about 67%. That meant you had about 2/3 of the assets to cover the value of the benefits earned. And as you can see, we had a very positive increase this year, going from 67% to 73%. And once again, the majority of that was due to that strong investment return. Translating that 73%, that's kind of a shortfall between your the assets you have on hand and the value of the liabilities. That 73% translates to about $89.7 billion, which, although still a big number, is a nice drop from we were about $106 billion last year. So that was nice to see. So in total, that number is about $90 billion, that unfunded. But under the funding plan, we really break that up into three pieces. And I'm going to focus on the first two pieces because those are the biggest pieces. First of all is the state share. And if you remember the state share, the state is responsible for funding the 1990 benefits. So that's the benefit structure and the contribution structure that were in place as of 1990. The second piece is the employer share, and that is related to benefits that really mainly the benefits that were adopted in 2000, 2001, those benefit increases that took place to give teachers a higher benefit level. So the difference between that new benefit level that was in place before PEPRA and the 1990 benefit level, there's an unfunded associated with that for service before 2014. And that's the red bars there. And so Dave's going to talk about that. One of the key things is how are we going to fund this, the shortfall, and the state has a responsibility, employers have a responsibility, and David's going to talk about that a little bit later. But I did want to add, really, when we talk, one thing that David and your staff have talked about during the risk summary is how the investment returns affect the different pieces. And this really is a good example of it. You can see the two things that we say is, A, is that investment returns affect the state piece a lot more than the employer piece. And you can see that with the state dropping by about $18 billion and the employer piece only moving about $3 billion. The second thing is that the state piece and the employer piece, based on investment returns, they will tend to move in opposite directions, and that also occurred this year. So basically kind of what we expected, and probably a very similar message they received probably last fall when your staff presented the risk report. Last piece, don't want to totally forget the unallocated piece. I see Dana's in the audience. I know she wants us to keep a close eye on that. We actually had some good news here. You can see last year we had about a $400 million or $0.4 billion deficit that we had an unfunded actual obligation. This year we have a negative unfunded actual obligation, which means we actually have a slight surplus. So now for that portion of the benefits, we actually have slightly more assets than the actual obligation. So that is good news. So our focus on the prior slides has been kind of where we are right now in the current situation. As I said, we also want to monitor where we're going. Rick talked about the 2046 pay down date, and this really shows that. So the light blue bar shows the projected unfunded actual obligation that we observed as of the last valuation. And you can see for about the about 15 years, we really were just kind of treading water, making no progress paying down, or at least our projection was we weren't going to make any progress. And you see an entirely different picture this year, and that's almost entirely due to that strong investment return. Because in this projection, we're not only reflecting the first 1/3 and the smoothing that we did in the other ones. As we go through, we kind of show the projected recognition of that deferred gain as it goes through, and that's why you see that big drop over the first few years. And as you can see, it's projected to be paid off in 2040, 6 years earlier than before. So definitely good news in that respect. Oh, but I would just, one thing, I was going to think Scott was going to kick me in the shin because I forget actuaries we got to say, but of course this is based on specific assumptions, particularly the 7% investment return and the 3.5% payroll growth. And as we've communicated and staff's communicated to you, that is not going to be what is actually going to happen. Things are going to change, and and that's why you spend so much time discussing risk. And I'm going to turn it over to David to talk about risk.
Thanks, Nick. And we always present to you the valuation results a couple months after the date has actually passed. So all these numbers look great because it was as of last June. I'm assuming you've all watched the news. You've all seen kind of what the markets have brought us so far this year. So just want to again highlight sort of we keep looking at risks on a daily basis, what's going on. And I think we just want to highlight here probably all the things you've heard about, like inflation. We all feel it when we go to the store. It's been high. So that's one thing we're keeping an eye on. The investment return, I believe we're still slightly positive so far this year, but unless things really turn around, it's quite likely we're going to finish the year below 7%. Now, the good news, as Nick mentioned, or the asset smoothing he talked about, the whole idea is like you can view it as a rainy day fund. We kind of took 2/3 of our gains last year, put them aside. So the good news is we have some room to earn less than 7 this year. So we should still be in a better place than we were a year ago, even if we don't meet our 7 this year. And the other one we're really keeping an eye on, you probably saw it started to hit the news about 2 weeks ago about, we knew the K-12 enrollments were expected to go down, but I think I just want to show you that chart here. If you recall last November when we presented you the risk report, we included in the report the K-12 projection for enrollments that Department of Finance releases from time to time. So the most recent numbers were released last June, and I think what made the news this year is the actual enrollments ended up being actually lower than projected. So we actually dropped below 6 million in California for the first time in almost 20 years. So and as you can see here, right now everything is pointing toward a continued decline for the next 10 years. So from our side, we're monitoring this because it could have a direct impact on how many teachers, because a drop in the number of teachers means less contributions, which may require for you as board members to potentially set a higher contribution rate to keep meeting our goal. So those are the things that we're kind of keeping an eye on. And next fall, as you know, we plan to spend again more time on this, either through our risk report on sort of the risks we are looking at and kind of doing a risk analysis. Did you have a question, Sharon? Yes.
You have the numbers on community colleges, because we've had, I know we're a smaller, bite of the CalSTRS membership, but I know just in talking to our chancellor, our enrollments have been down significantly as well. So I don't know if we have data on that, or it might be in your risks. I think we probably should, since community colleges are part of our membership, maybe include
Yes, so far we have yet to be able to find a projection like this for community colleges. We're going to see if we can find more information between now and the fall when we report back to you.
Great.
You do?
Yeah,
perfect. We'll work with finance.
But the community college office also used to have a lot of projections years in past. So we will look for it, and we'll find some projections and give them to you.
Good.
Yes.
Thanks.
So
I want to just, I think for the pacing of the items, what I would like to do is if you could just make note of the questions that you have, and when they finish their presentation, we'll just go to questions.
Sure.
Okay? Thanks.
So,
Thank you.
in light of this, we're sort of ready to talk about our recommendations. If you saw the item, based on the results of the evaluation for both the employer contribution rate and the state contribution rate, so we have evaluation policy where we take the results, we calculate what the rate could be. And in both cases, the answer coming out of the evaluation said we could slightly lower both the employer and the state contribution rate. But because of the reason of those risks that we're monitoring, what we are recommending for both the state and for the employer contribution rates is to actually keep those rates at the exact same level that they are this fiscal year. So what you see here on this chart for the state contribution rate, we just wanted you to see sort of where we've been since the funding plan has been passed. So the red bar is actually a base contribution rate set in statute, about 2% for the state. As a board, what you control is the blue bars. It's the state supplemental contribution rate. So this year, we're recommending to keep the supplemental rate at about 6.3%, exactly the rate that it is this fiscal year. The one thing I want to point out is Governor Newsom, through his budget when it was released in January, included the expectation that the state contribution rate would be kept at the existing level. So our recommendation is already built into the state's budget for 22-23. Just something for you to be aware. So this is for the state contribution rate. Similarly, for the employers, same thing. You can see here the contribution rates for the employers since the funding plan has been adopted. Again, the red, 8.25, is the rate set in statute. The blue bar is what you control. And again, we are recommending that we keep the total contribution rate for the employers at 19.1. That would be the third fiscal year in a row that the rate is at 19.1. What I need to point out here, if you remember, there has been a rate relief or rate subsidy in place for the employers for the last 3 fiscal years. The state gave us over $2 billion that was used to lower the rates. This fiscal year, the rate subsidy or the rate relief is 2.18%. As of today, there is still no rate relief being proposed for the employers. So unless something is being done through the budget, the employers will have to pay 2.18% more if you adopt our recommendation of 19.1. Again, the rate you adopt, if you go with our recommendation, is not going to change, but employers will have to pay more because potentially that rate subsidy might go away. Now, I'll share with you that we have received a request a few weeks ago to provide cost information, how much it would cost to provide various percentages of rate relief. So we've received a request, but we have yet to see anything. I believe the May revise is due in maybe 2 weeks or so. So we'll have to see if something happens between now and then. But as of now, there's nothing included. So we'll keep an eye on it, and we will let all of you know if something changes. But as of now, nothing out there. With this, yeah, and we're pretty much done right now. I'm at my. We are ready to have you take action on the recommendation in front of you.
Yeah, before we do, let's get to some questions.
Yes.
I know Mr. Dan is in the queue, and I believe Mr. Tang, you want to jump back in? Okay, so Jennifer?
Thank you. Thank you. One question, one request. We have talked before about the increase of the teacher retirements. Is there an emerging trend one way or other there? I recognize it's probably short history.
I would say that, remember last year we had seen what first was kind of an alarming real increase in the first half of the year, then things kind of slowed down. This year we can report that we're about where we expect. Okay. So it seems that everything has reverted back to more in line with our projections. So terrific. I guess no news, good news.
Yeah, terrific.
So nationwide with employment, there was the great resignation, and now there's the great regret. And so it's been more of a churn, people's, quitting and then waiting a while and then being reemployed. So it's more like a churn that was delayed. So I think we're finding that with retirement too, so that things are back to sort of what we would expect.
And then a sort of a comment question. So I know how difficult it is when you have these quite material emerging risks and that you need to think about a range of outcome. Another part that I know we have to think about is there any change in the pattern of the expected payout as well? And are you also, you're keeping a sharp eye on that, I assume, and you're also alerting us should you see any, potential change in what that pattern might look like to ensure that we can meet not only the long-term funding plan, but also any acute changes in pattern along the way?
Yes.
Okay.
And we also have teams in our financial services branch and in the investment office also that keep an eye on daily cash flows as well.
Yeah.
So we're keeping a close eye on both short-term, mid-term, and long-term cash flows. And if we see things we don't like, you can be sure that you will be the first to hear about it.
Great. And then, so with that, nothing material in that. Okay.
So
great.
what we've
Thank
kind
you.
of seen with our retirees is and nationwide, there's been something called excess deaths. And we don't want to get into a depressing issue, but yeah, because of the last couple years, there's been excess deaths over what would otherwise be expected. So that's sort of reduced the payouts that we've had. So we haven't really seen anything exceptional in payouts. And we look at it pretty much every day, so.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jennifer. We'll go to Ms. Miller and then Mr. Tang. Gail?
Oh, thank you. I thought you were before me, Mr. Tang.
He was slow to the punch.
Thank you. Gotta get that. Thank you. This is like my favorite part. You do such incredible work, and I really appreciate it. And as you know, this has been a huge interest of the governor. So just a couple of questions. We support this plan, understand how important it is. One, on this asset smoothing and how it turns into a rainy day fund, I don't fully understand how that works, just given sort of the interplay with investments and how some of it goes back into investments, and obviously a huge debt of gratitude to that team and the incredible returns that allow for this smoothing. But could you explain how this works as like a rainy day fund? Because what I think of a rainy day fund and what you do may be a little bit different.
Yeah, it's totally different. Or maybe what we simply do is we ignore what the actual value of the assets are when we do our funding calculations. So just for the actual valuation, so let's say I'll give you an example. Let's say we had a $30 million gain. Since the board's policy is to have only recognize 1/3, when we do the actual valuation, we assume as if we only had a $10 million gain. And we put the other $20 million aside for the next valuation. So it's more of it's a number, I guess, on paper only. That's why we call it the actual value of asset. We ignore what the actual value is, and we use a lower one.
So, and it's about a third?
It's about the investment gains, we've only recognized about a third of it. So that's why if you look right now in the actual valuation, you will see that we also disclose what the market value is.
Yep.
So you can see, remember we reported to you the funded status as 73%? It's actually more than 80% on a market value of asset basis. So if we did not do the asset smoothing, we would report an 80%. A more than 80% funded status.
Right.
It is on page 12 or 11 of the attached report.
Yeah, that was my next question on the market value of the assets
It
versus
works the opposite too when there's a loss.
Yeah,
So.
Right.
And it's fairly common process for most pension fund in North America to use some kind of asset smoothing. It's to help smooth the impact on contribution rates and funding results of the fluctuations we see year to year in the investment return.
Thank you. And then just in terms of how, given that we're barely positive and obviously lots of market fluctuations, and this may not be a fair question, this may be an unfair question to our investments team, how big a loss can we sustain and still have our asset smoothing work?
So here's the easiest way to look at it. Last year we earned 27%. We were, from an actual basis, our baseline is 7. We want to beat 7. So we beat it by 20%. So we've recognized about a third. I'll make it simpler. We recognize about 7 of the 27. So we have, we had a gain of 20%, about 20. So we've recognized 7%. So you can view it as we have another 14%. So we could miss the mark by about 14%, which means a -7. I wish we won't get there.
No.
Chris? No. So good. So that's how much we could. So we could. So we could sustain quite a loss.
Yeah.
Got it.
So the best way to look at it is if we were somehow to end up at -7, we would be back exactly sort of close to the schedule we were 2 years ago before the good return.
Great.
So that's how critical that investment return was last year.
Yes, thank you. And then in terms of risks, you didn't add teacher retirements. Do you just include that in declining enrollment in terms of?
I guess it's more, we view it more as so I guess both teacher retirements and the enrollments are issues. Again, as I stated before, retirements are not necessarily something we should fear, because it's not, we are a retirement plan. That's the whole purpose. We want our teachers to retire, have a good retirement. What we need to look for is whether the teachers who retire are being replaced.
Yes.
So that's why the enrollment is what worries us a little bit, because if enrollment is down and someone retires, a school district may decide, oh, we no longer need that position.
Mm-hmm. But I do think I would like to see that, I think it's more than that. I actually think it's not just are we replacing retired teachers, it's how many people are entering the workforce, especially after a really tough 2 years. So I think it's sometimes, as we're seeing across the state, there actually aren't enough teachers. And so it's not just about retirement. So I see that as a little bit of a risk. Like, how do we actually make sure that there are teachers in the workforce? In addition, I think it's a really fair point on retirement.
Yeah,
maybe just to include that.
And it's the changing in the workforce also. Because they may need fewer teachers because people are being taught, by Zoom and other methods.
Right.
So they feel like they can teach more students, using technology, and they don't actually need the teachers. So it's also the changing technology, it's the retirements, it's the teacher shortages. It's all of that we try to look at every day. That's another thing we look at to try to see what's going on.
Absolutely, but maybe if we could just include that as a risk we're watching and report on it, along with kind of the community college point from the vice chair. I do think that there has been kind of a precipitous decline, and again, we can help you with those data. Those come from the community college system, and we feed those into estimates. But I do think that decline in student needs is also an interesting
No, we will do that. We've actually been thinking internally to potentially start including either this year or the following year in our risk report some information about future demographic trends that, based on the current demographics and our assumptions, how many retirements we might see and so forth. So maybe based on this, we may try to see if we can include it this year, if not for sure, the following year. So thank you.
And then just one more really brief question. I'm sorry. In their asset smoothing and the ability to lose, is that when you say we could go to -7, although we won't do that, does that still get us to 2040, or that gets us to 46 then?
So I think, so it would probably, so if we were to have, I'm going to head back to that slide here. It potentially, if we, depending where we are this year, you can expect that we may end up somewhere between these two. So right now, we would still be able to meet by 2046. We might still be able to get there a little bit sooner, but you're correct. It's probably going to push. Right now, we're looking at 2041. So anything less than 7 is going to push that date out a few years, depending where we land.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Tang, and then Mr. Johnson.
Well, I'm learning a great deal this morning so far already about all of this. But I think I wanted to piggyback both what Mr. Dan and Ms. Miller are saying in terms of the teacher shortage. And so I was wondering if you had also include that in your projections, because I know that there are quite a number of shortage in terms of teachers. Many school districts are having problem filling those positions. I know LAUSD is repurposing a lot of their staff to go back into the classroom and stuff. And I know that other districts, including my own, where I'm a school board member, we're having trouble just filling all of the certificated position. Is that something that you've projected as well? Because I know that you mentioned that we have the great retired, and then the great resignation, and then all of a sudden now I guess they're waiting a little bit and then coming back. So is that something that has been projected as well, or calculated in the projection?
Yeah, so as Nick mentioned earlier, I think in all of the projections, I went back to that slide because it stated at the top, it quotes what we call the 3.5% payroll growth. I guess in the valuations, and Nick, feel free to jump in if you want to, we generally assume that so we've already reflected the drop in the number of teachers that we have seen. So it went down by about 19,000 in 2021. And then generally our assumption has been to assume payroll from that point will grow at 3.5%, which means that we expect the number of teachers to stay about the same. So that's what's been built into in the valuation. What we've done in years past in our risk report is we've modeled what if we start to see decline in the number of teachers, and we plan to do that again this fall. But in the work in front of you, it assumes that the population will remain stable from what we are seeing today, which is already lower than it was a year or two ago.
So just to follow up, if Mr. Chair, so if we were to be successful in let's say the next year or two in terms of recruiting and retaining teachers, then that projection is going to obviously go up.
Correct.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Quick question, kind of piggyback on Gail's question regarding asset smoothing. So is asset smoothing strictly a mechanism to reach full funding and mitigate against a downturn while trying to reach that? Or will it cease once we reach full funding?
No, no, it would not cease. It's a mechanism. So it's a policy the board has adopted. It's simply used as a tool to smooth the impact of investment return on contribution rates, which for us is not as big of a deal because we already have parameters in the funding plan by how much we can change contribution rates. But most pension systems use that as a way to just smooth out the impact of investment performance on the calculation of contribution rates.
So I'll say this, public pension plans and government entities need stable budget. And so this is a part of that to try to make sure that contribution requests are as stable and as steady as possible every year so they can plan out into the future. So this is a mechanism to do that because markets go up and down, they're volatile, as we've seen, 27% last year, and now we're at, barely positive. So if you were to put that actually into the model up and down every year, then your contribution requests would go up and down like that. And so what we've seen is, in countless studies, that over time, and we use smoothing, and some systems use like 7-year smoothing, for example, New York City plans, that if you do that, you can get smooth contributions and still get to the same endpoint, which is the goal. So that's why we use smoothing.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question? Sorry.
Sure.
I'm curious about the smoothing piece because it sounds like different funds use different. So we at some point as a board helped set that policy of 3-year smoothing, and I guess I'd love to just hear a little bit more about sort of the variation of that 3, 5, 7 years, and what's your expertise in terms of 3 years being, for us, being, the appropriate pacing of that smoothing? Because obviously, we can look at, Chris always shows us the numbers, over the last 10, 20, 30 years, and there has been a lot of volatility in terms of those numbers. So why is 3 the best number for us at CalSTRS?
So it's something that we review every 4 years as part of the review of all of our assumptions and methods. I think 3 is quite appropriate for us. I would say it's probably on the shorter side compared to other SIPs, and that's because we already have, I would say, rate smoothing built into the funding plan. So I would say Scott and Nick, 5 years is probably the most common out there in the United States.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think 3 years works fine for us because we already have rate smoothing built into. So we have 2 layers, if you want. We have our asset smoothing, 3 years, which is adopted by you, and then we have the rate smoothing, if you want, kind of impose on us through the funding plan. So we've got two mechanisms in place.
So, and I just add a little history. Before the funding plan was in place, it really didn't matter too much because contribution rates weren't moving with it. Then when the funding plan was put in place, we gave that a lot of thought, and our recommendation is 3 years still makes sense. And we actually did some modeling and we definitely found that was the case. And it's exactly because David said, you guys are somewhat unique and you've got those limits on how much you can move contribution rates. So you don't want those limits being applied also having your assets being slow to react. So we're very comfortable with the 3 years.
Yeah. So David, what page is the resolution on?
So the
4A.
The actual recommendation is on page 8.
8.
And then we have 3 separate attachments for each of the resolutions.
Okay, next step is to approve one of the resolutions.
Correct. We just need to approve all 3 of them. And you can all do it all in one motion. You can just approve the staff's recommendation, which are the 3 rates you see on the slide right now.
And are we prepared to do that at this point?
I am prepared.
Okay. Just as a note, I appreciate the line of questionings. They're all spot on. And you can be assured we'll continue to monitor these trends very, very closely because I don't think any of us really know the full implications of the changes that may affect public education, the number of students, the number of teachers, and the full impact of technology, as well as issues around the pandemic, as well as choices and options people have other than education. We certainly want to encourage people to stay in education, but there are lots of challenges that our teachers and educators are facing, many of which are just simple and basic in cost of living and being able to afford to remain teachers. So there are lots of challenges and headwinds. We'll remain curious about them, and I think it probably in the next fiscal year, there might be a high probability that we'll have a discussion about these issues that are not part of this presentation, but a separate item, perhaps at an offsite. So I'll turn to Ms. Hendricks.
I just moved the staff recommendation on page 8 for item 4A.
It's been moved by Ms. Hendrick to approve the staff recommendation, seconded by Ms. Paquin. Any other questions or discussion? Mr. Bartow, our general counsel.
I would just like David to name each of the resolutions that you're approving.
Sure.
Rather than just reference them by page.
Sure. David, would you?
Thank you.
Yes, we have 3 resolutions for you. There's one to adopt the state supplemental contribution rate of 6.311 for next fiscal year. The second one is for the employer supplemental contribution rate to set it at 10.850% for next fiscal year. And the third one is for the normal cost for 2 at 62 members, 18.150%. And again, this one has no impact on our members. It's just something that you have to adopt every year. And the contribution rate for the 2 at 62 members will remain at 10.205% for next year. So those are the 3 recommendations, and each of the resolutions is a separate attachment in your packet.
Thank you, David. Jennifer, would you take the roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Yamamoto?
Aye.
Mr. Tang?
Yes.
Ms. Hendricks?
Yes.
Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Ms. Erden?
Yes.
Mr. Ruffino?
Yes.
And Chairperson Keeler, do you care to vote?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. With that, we'll take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at about 10:35.
About the results for the defined benefits supplemental evaluation.
So on slide 2 here, this covers the defined benefits supplement program and shows the funded status both at the June 30, 2021 valuation and the prior year. So the purposes of the valuation are both to assess the financial condition and then to calculate any additional earnings credit according to the board policy, which we'll get to in a moment. But looking at the financial condition, obviously the really strong fiscal year return through the end of fiscal year 2021 significantly improved the funded status from about 122% in the 2020 valuation to over 150% funded in the 2021 valuation. Or to look at it another way, on the surplus of the value of assets compared to the actuarial obligation, it increased from a $2.5 billion surplus to about a $6 billion surplus. Important to note, the assets shown here are market value. This is not a 3-year smooth number, unlike the DB plan that we were just talking about. So that's one of the reasons that this moves so dramatically year over year.
And with this, we just want to show, so the recommendation in front of you, based on the board policy, we calculated an additional earnings credit of 13.21%. What we want to show you on this slide is that you can see the history of when the board granted additional earnings credit before. The policy has a two-step process, and because we are 150% funded, for the first time ever, the second threshold is actually kicking in. So you can see here, we've color shaded both the first step and the second step. But we are recommending that we follow the board policy and adopt a 13.21% additional earnings credit for the program. And as noted at the bottom of the slide, after the AEC, if it's granted, it will lower the funded status to about 135.6%, which will still be the highest funded status ever for that program, even with the granting of the additional earnings credit. And that's it for us. We are ready for you to vote. So the recommendation is on page 3, and the actual resolution is attachment 2 to the agenda item.
Thank you, David. I'd entertain a motion. If there are no. And what are you moving, Mr. Tang? The staff recommendations?
Staff recommendations.
Thank you. Mr. Tang, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's moved and properly second. David, would you just announce what the item is that we're approving?
It's item 4B. You're approving an additional earning credit of 13.21% for the defined benefit supplement program.
Thank you. Seeing no questions, no one in the queue. Jennifer, would you take the roll, please?
Sure. Ms. Piquin?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. Yamamoto?
Aye.
Mr. Tang?
Aye.
Ms. Hendricks?
Yes.
Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Ms. Erden?
Yes.
Mr. Rufino?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Chairperson Keeley, would you care to vote?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Jennifer. David, back to you.
Whoops. I'm trying to move the slides, but there we go. Perfect. So I'll turn it over to Scott to talk.
So the next slide, cash balance benefit program, it's a similar story, but on a different scale. If you compare this graph to 2 slides before, we're talking millions now instead of billions, but very similar story. Big improvement in the funded status due to the 27% return for the relevant year. So in the 2020 valuation, funded status was about 118%. It grew to 146% funded. Again, this is on a market value actuarial, or the actuarial value of assets shown here is the market value, no smoothing. And so the surplus of assets over the actuarial obligation grew from 57 million to 152 million at the 2021 valuation date.
And similar to DBS, you can see the history of the additional earnings credit granted by the board, and once again for cash balance. Both steps of the policy are triggering an additional earnings credit. We are recommending that an 11.65% additional earnings credit be granted for members of the cash balance program. And as noted at the bottom of the slide, after the AEC, the funded status will be 131.2%. Once again, the highest we would have seen even after granting the AEC. So again, recommendations on page 3, attachment 2, we're asking that you adopt an 11.65% additional earnings credit for the active members of the cash balance program.
Thanks, David. Ms. Hendricks?
So David, remind me again, the practical translation of what we're approving to members in the cash balance plan. So it's for folks that are active in
Correct. So it's for everyone who's active as until today. So someone who retired yesterday would not get the additional earnings credit. They have to be active on the day of the board taking action, and it will be applied to their balance in their account as of June 30th, 2021.
Got it.
So we're going to go back to their balance a year ago, increase that balance by 11.65%.
Okay.
Just to clarify, they don't have to be actively contributing. They could be inactive.
Correct.
Deferred at that point, just not retired.
Not retired.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, the non-retired members, correct. And it's the same for the defined benefit supplement as well.
Right. And most of the cash balance members in general are
Community
adjunct
college, yeah,
faculty,
part-time.
right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and just going back to your question from earlier, we did see a drop in the active members on the community, on the cash balance, which I think may translate to what you were talking about.
Yeah, no, enrollment for community college, I think it's 8% this year, and that means part-timers losing jobs, basically, which is not good. So I just was curious what the impact would be. So they'll get an 11.65%. Thank you. And with that, I would move approval of this item.
Second. It's been moved and properly seconded. Before we take the vote, I'll turn to Ms. Miller.
Thank you. Just a question on this. We have expressed Department of Finance some concerns on this in the past in the budget. We support this one, but just as we move forward, depending on the status of the fund, what are our options on the cash balance if the fund does, would this become a balancing item in the fund if we don't meet the returns or projections? How does the long term of the cash balance sort of play out as we look at how it's growing over time?
So I'll take that. So let's go back to 2009, where the funded status of the cash balance plan was well below 100%. So we only credit at Treasury rates, at different rates. So, and then as we continue to earn more than that, then that piece is added to store up the actual fund to make sure that it gets up to 100%. So we don't credit every year what we earn. We credit at a minimum rate, and that rate is actually part of the up for the board to approve. It's
what, and the rate, it's up annually to approve?
It's up annually to approve the rate. So for the cash balance plan, the minimum interest rate.
And it's always at the minimal interest rate, so it doesn't, you don't build it into the base and then it grows accordingly?
It's not built into the base. It's always the minimum interest rate for cash balance. And then if we make more like we've done, then that's what the additional earnings credit is to spread some of the additional earnings. So using that, in 2009, the fund quickly got back to 100% plus. So it's a mechanism designed to make sure that we stay pretty much close to 100%.
Yeah, I just say actuaries are generally very nervous about seeing benefit increases, but we really like the way these programs are designed. So as much as I could ever say I'm comfortable with this, with increasing benefits, I would say we are.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, and it's not a compounded increase, so that's really helpful. Yeah, okay, great, thank you very much.
And just to point out, those interest rate, the minimum interest rate that Rick mentioned, it's actually on the agenda today. It's a consent action item. They're tied directly to U.S. Treasury rate. So, for example, we're asking that the board adopts a 2.09 minimum interest rate for the cash balance program next fiscal year, which is tied to a U.S. Treasury rate. So, as long as we earn more than 2%, then that surplus balance is going to grow.
Thanks, Ms. Miller. There is a motion on the floor, and there's a second. No other members of the board are in the queue, so we will take a roll call vote.
Sure. Ms. Bigwin? Aye. Mr. Johnson? Aye. Ms. Yamamoto? Aye. Mr. Tang?
Aye.
Ms. Hendricks?
Yes.
Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Ms. Erden?
Yes.
Mr. Ruffino?
Yes.
Ms. Miller? Aye. Chairperson Keeley, do you care to vote?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Any members of the public that would like to speak on these items?
There are no members of the public to speak on items.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to item 5.
And you have 10 minutes for this item, David. If you could be, we can all be very mindful
quick. We
of
actually
time.
don't have a presentation for this. So this is the annual review of the lump sum debt benefit. I just want to highlight a few things on page 2 of your item. So this is, the board has acted 9 times since 1994 to increase this benefit. You can see the history of how the benefit has changed on page 2 of your item. Generally, the law allows you to make increases and also talks about them being tied to California inflation. In the item itself, we have included 3 cost information on 3 different types of increases. One of them is a 6.5% increase, which was the inflation we saw in California in calendar year 2021. There's a 10% increase. The reason 10 is there is more because, again, if you wanted to change the benefit, it doesn't have to be one of the percentages that's listed there. We like to include something like 10 because it's a round number. So if you wanted to do 5, we could just divide everything by by 2 if you want to get an idea of the impact. But this is not so it's there more for information purposes. And the other one we like to put there, again, just for information purposes, was more if we had always kept that benefit with inflation, what it would be today, that is again on page 3, that it would require a 60% increase to those benefits. So from our perspective, now that we've talked about the defined benefit program, the contribution rates, you've seen our funded status, you've seen our contribution rates, they're the highest they've ever been. Our recommendation remains what we've had for the last few years, that to keep the debt benefit where it is. We understand you may still want to increase it. If you want to do so, the cost information again is on page 3. It would increase our unfunded liability if you decide to increase the debt benefit. For example, the 6.5% option would increase the unfunded liability by an estimated $66 million, and a 10% increase by about $101 million. That is all for us. We're happy to take any questions.
Don't see any questions. Ms. Hendricks?
I was just wondering how you think about, given the projection of inflation, this year and potentially in the next couple of years, how that factors into your recommendations. Or I don't know if it's a question for the actuaries or someone else, to be honest, but I mean, because as I think about inflation, the cost of, just goods in general, and I would imagine the cost of things like, funeral, end of life kinds of issues increase in the environment that we're in. So I guess I'm looking for help in how we think about that right now.
So if you look at the action you took last year and 3 years ago, I think both times, as a board, you tried to make sure that the benefit would not further fall below inflation, if you want. So I think the action you took last year was to increase it by 1.7%, which was the inflation seen in calendar year 2020. So if you wanted to do the same thing this year and you want to make sure it doesn't fall further behind inflation, then I would say go with the 6.5% option. The 10% would help you increase it a little bit faster than the inflation seen last year, which, considering what we've seen so far this calendar year, we're on pace again. Inflation is again tracking high. So that could be one reason for you to go with the 10% versus 6.5%. But at least if you don't want the benefit to further fall behind inflation as of December 31st, then I would say go with 6.5%.
Ms. Yamamoto?
Hi there, thank you. Lots of things to think about. It's been keeping me up at night trying to worry about what I need to do as my fiduciary responsibility. And I think I talked to you, David, about this lump sum increase doesn't put any more restrictions or any liability on the employers. That's right?
Correct. Yeah, I forgot to mention that based on the rules of the funding plan, any increases would be allocated to the state share of the unfunded liability, therefore impacting potentially only the state contribution rate in the future.
Okay. And because it only impacts the state, the percentages that you have on page 2, what is it, page 3, is like really, really tiny compared to the whole scheme of the budget and our fund. Is that correct?
Correct. They are, compared to the total contribution rate that the state is paying, those numbers are not material. Yeah, they are much smaller, correct.
Okay. Because I know that people will say, well, people should plan for their end-of-life expenses and things like that. Some people have, some people have not for various reasons. But I know that with the inflation, I'm looking at the 6.5 as a realistic figure for us to think about and to be concerned about our members, because generally I think we think about those kinds of expenses going toward our older members. And last count, I thought there were only over 400 retirees that are over 100 years old. Mm-hmm. So those might benefit as well. So I'm just thinking that rather than have the full discussion, I also talked to you about, is this amount adequate? Is this amount adequate for today, for tomorrow, or whatever? And then on the same token, is it, can we compare ourselves, CalSTRS, with other funding systems in the United States? Are we on par? Are we below par? Or are we meeting the expectations? Do we have the ability to pay that amount as a death benefit? And one of the things that I always chime in is that in order for the survivors to benefit from that, it's the people that are living today to fill out that form to make sure that death benefit gets distributed accordingly. But that's another story. That's my other soapbox that I'm always on. But I'm inclined to, one hand, think about a study or just do some more research on the adequacy of our death benefit amount, and then also to not go with your recommendation and propose the 6.5% increase. So that's what I would like to do, Mr. Chair, if that's possible.
So I don't think there was a specific question that has to be responded to.
No.
Right at this point. What I'd like to do is hear the other board members and then see if you want to float a recommendation.
Sure,
see how
sure.
the conversation flows at this point.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Ms. Yamamoto. Ms. Miller and then Mr. Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Yamamoto. So I'm a little bit concerned that we don't really know everything, and I don't know the last time you looked at everything that's included in the death benefit. We referred to kind of end of life and death benefit and burial services. So that's a really wide spectrum of everything that's included, and potentially, if we're talking about end of life, long-term care, that could be infinitely more expensive than burial services. So like the concern I have is this isn't, while I agree that these are really important, I agree that inflation is obviously difficult for so many of us. I am really concerned that we don't have any kind of guardrails around exactly what's included in this. And while we have a preliminary estimate based on what we've been doing this whole time, if in fact we see some end-of-life options included in these numbers, I'm concerned that will really be, the impact on the fund will be greater than we're currently thinking. So I would like to see some of us, Mr. Lamoureux, I think you said the last time we looked at this was 2015. I would like to get a better understanding of all that's included and inflation impacts, to Ms. Yamamoto's point about maybe using a little bit more time to look at it, understand that there's two schools of thought there. But for me, I don't know how it would work to defer the item until we have more information, but I don't think there's enough information necessarily to approve an increase when we don't know all that's included in it. So Mr. Lamoureux, I don't know if you want to comment on that, or Mr. Reed.
There we go. I think all I would say is based on the two comments we have, we can certainly research. I think the last time was September of 2015 that we presented an item to the board related to this, and we can certainly do that again to maybe hopefully be able to present it before next year's review of the lump sum death benefit. So we'll look to put something on our work plan for next year.
May I make a suggestion or a question? Would this be better addressed in the Benefits and Services Committee?
I would think so.
Yeah, so why doesn't the Benefit and Service Committee think about putting something on the work plan for next year that actually addresses Ms. Yamamoto and Ms. Miller's line of questions? There are a series of issues that were raised, and comment was, since we haven't reviewed it since 2015, I think it would be a good place for that to be.
But then I think, Mr. Chair, if I may, just to follow up to that. So if someone were to want to take advantage of this benefit now, is that a clear process by which our members could take advantage of it while we're studying it? Does that question make sense?
They already get a death benefit, right?
Okay, so it would be got it. So it would be.
And they're already usually on record as to who the death beneficiary is. So-
Great, okay, so there's nothing, just to be clear to our members, there's nothing they would need to do now in order to take advantage as we're looking at it, potentially what's included in an increase. Okay, thank you.
We just need to make sure they designate.
Oh, yes.
You gotta designate
For the public out there. Just make sure you.
Got it, okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Dan?
Thank you, Harry. And my concerns and my questions were largely expressed and asked for in Karen and Gail's comments. So I do look forward to that information and discussion in Benefits and Services Committee in the future. I do have just one quick question for those of us who are newer board members. In the years when inflation was running below the assumed rate, I don't believe we ever reduced the inflation. Is that right? We still, even in the amount?
No, we've never reduced the death benefit.
Yeah.
So the question before us was always whether we should increase it or not.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you. That was just for context. Thank you.
So go back to Karen.
Okay, and just another thing just to call it to people's attention, that from 2002 to 2018, the amount was the same. Nothing happened in that period. So it wasn't until 2018 that an amount, I think it was 2 point something percent, and then last year was 1.7%. And I just want to comment that I do think that we need to look at this further, the study, and I think bringing it back to Benefits and Services is a great idea. But I also think that should not preclude us from making the recommendation or, looking at increasing the benefit today.
So I don't know, Karen, if you're floating that as a motion and looking for a second, because if you are, I think that's what we want to be clear about.
Is that in order right now?
Yeah, I don't see anyone else. So the staff recommendation is status quo. What you're raising is the cost of living adjustment for the death benefit, and the dollar amount associated with Ms. Yamamoto's request is what, David?
So they're on page 3. So if the board wanted to increase the death benefit by 6.5%, it would raise what we call the coverage A, and the retired member death benefit amount is $6,903, and the active coverage B member lump sum death benefit to $27,612 for an estimated increase in the liabilities or the actual obligation of $66 million. So that is all on page 3 of the item.
Okay, thank you for that. Ms. Hendricks?
So I think what I'm trying to process, Karen, because I'm in alignment with a lot of your comments. I think as a board, I'm always trying to figure out what's the process we go through and what's consistent over time, right? Because I think in my heart, I kind of go, gosh, I would like to increase the death beneficiary every year because costs go up. And so I think that's the challenge, I think, before us as a board, because I feel like we're, consistently in this spot, where we have to make this decision. And I guess for me, it would be helpful maybe for you to reiterate. I just want us to be consistent and to have something kind of, that sort of is a foundation that supports the decisions that we make as a board, and they're not just, not that they are in any way like capricious but just not reactive to what we see happening in the world. And I just saw the notice right now that the Fed did increase by, 0.5%, highest since 2020 or 2000. So, yeah, so maybe, I don't know if it's in order, Mr. Chair, just to kind of.
Yeah, I think you're articulating a pause and some hesitation, balancing what Karen's recommending and the health of the fund and the cost to this program and a process. So you're expressing a pause there. Gail, and then we'll we'll see where folks are at. You're next in the queue.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I appreciate that, Ms. Hendricks, and agree, and a little bit of a pause and analysis. I also will note that the 66 million that would be borne by the state isn't incorporated into any of the state's estimates. So I'm not sure how that would work, honestly, and I just want to be mindful that it's a really significant increase for the state to bear without prior notice. So I do think a longer runway and perhaps more of a consistent increase over time with the COLA does make more sense than sort of a one-off increase. So would again, just like a little bit more time, but certainly understand the concerns around inflation at end-of-life costs.
Thanks very much, Gail. And I think please.
Last year was 1.7, right?
Correct.
And that was the inflation.
That was the inflation in calendar year
Okay.
2020, correct.
So this year is 6.5.
Correct. If you decide to base it on inflation seen
Right.
in California in 2020.
And that's what we did last year.
Yes, and what you did 3 years ago as well.
Okay. So it's consistent. Right?
2 times, right? We've
Consistent.
Yeah, so if you adopt 6.5%, and that will be the third time of the last 4 years that you adopt an increase tied to inflation, which is nice because you can tie it to an actual figure that's publicly available.
Anything else,
That's
Karen?
the question.
That's-
Do we do that?
yes.
Do we tie it to inflation?
I just wanted to make it,
It's good.
it was clear to me when I talked to David about it, so I feel a lot better. And I know that it's a lot of money to, people on the street, 66 million is a lot of money. But I'm hoping that we'll get the support of the state and, be able to figure out how we can best do that. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Karen. So I would suggest that as the Benefits and Service Committee looks at this issue for next year, that there also be, you explore with them some options other than this issue potentially every year coming before us. We may very well be in an inflationary period where inflation is running higher than people thought for a longer period of time, and at the same time, we have to balance the health of the fund, and the cost is bared by the state, and the state has many challenges. I don't think there's anybody on the dais who would not like to see the benefit increase, but there are trade-offs, and we have to be sensitive to those. So I think being open to potentially that the environment might be changing and help us process maybe not having this discussion every May for the next few years because of the inflation, it might be helpful. Maybe there's no alternative. Maybe this is it. I don't have a second yet for your motion, Ms. Yamamoto, and I'm going to pause for 5 seconds to see if there is a second.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Yamamoto and seconded by Mr. Tang to approve a increase to the death benefit by 6.5%. Is there any discussion on that or any further questions? As a matter of process, I'm going to get to Ms. Miller, and if Brian, if you could think of this. We have members of the public that want to speak to us on this issue. What is the proper process? Do they speak to us before we vote or after?
Before.
Thank you. Okay. So we'll go to Ms. Miller, and once the board have gotten through the queue, we'll recognize the members of the public that want to address us on this issue. Ms. Miller.
Thank you. So once we make, just because hopefully inflation is certainly not transitory, but we will see a decrease, right? That's all these actions. Once we make a change for inflation, when inflation is at an all-time high, which is going to be an outlier, also we hope, because if not, there's a whole other slew of problems. So we can't bring it back down, right? So when you correct for high inflation, it's the reason you don't base pay raises often on inflation, but on COLA, right? So when you correct for inflation, you don't then come back when inflation goes down and bring it back down.
So keep in mind that if the 6.5% increase is granted, all we're doing is we're making sure that the value of the benefit as now is on track with the sort of inflation or price level was in place last December.
Right.
If inflation is only 1% this year, which is below our assumption, the death benefit is still going to lose a 1% value unless it's increased by 1% again next year.
Right.
So unless we see deflation, which is negative inflation, potentially the value of the benefit will keep dropping compared to inflation if it's not increased. So it's really about the moment we see positive inflation. If the death benefit is not increased in the future, its value will be reduced, if you want.
Well, yes, except that this is now sort of a permanent change. So
yeah, this one is a permanent change, correct.
Right. So this isn't. Inflation is potentially a point in time. This is a permanent change, and then it brings into question sort of, how other benefits and how other salaries work. So in my opinion, I do think there's some precedent setting here. Completely respect costs and how concerning it is, but I'm really concerned about the precedent setting when we look to the long term. Small piece of it, much bigger picture in terms of what's included and what the risks are to the fund if we make a policy determination around inflation versus another measure. So with that, Mr. Chair, I
recognize the members of the public. If we could hear from the members of the public.
So we have 2 members of the public in the queue, so each will get 3 minutes. Give us a second to get the timer up. Okay, so our first will be Dave. Good. Go ahead, Dave.
Hello, I'm Dave Davini. I'm a retired school administrator. I'm happy to see through the valuations that the state position is getting better. The amount of contributions they're making are stabilized, and looking forward, they will get better. The death benefit is a benefit that helps every member, active as well as retired. It's there for all of us as members. We in this room represent all members. The death benefit is in our recruitment brochures. We use that to attract people when we say, look, CalSTRS offers benefits, and this is a benefit. In fact, it's a vested benefit. We use it to retain teachers. We say, look, this is a benefit for you. Why are we shying away from something that was negotiated with the legislature years ago, and we fail to increase it? We fail to support our members. End-of-life costs, folks, are real. Those of us who are older have high health costs. Some of our lower monthly allowed people are using reverse mortgages and other methods to try to get by in older age. Their family has a decreased estate. They may not have decent funerals. What are we doing? The most that this will affect the unfunded liability for the state is less than 1/4% of payroll. When you look at dollars, that's one thing, but look at what its actually effect is. It's very small. Members are out there and they're looking at you for protections, for help with their existence. Don't shy away from what you should do. What you should do is keep this vested benefit whole, not let it go down. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. We will reset the timer. Okay, our next speaker will be Charles. Charles, go ahead.
Charles Denon, I'm with the California Retired Teachers Association of California, and we have 35,000 members, and every one of them, I believe, would like to see you take the right action, and that is to act proactively, even though we are reacting. We've already had the inflation. Today I drove here, and I paid twice the amount to fill up my gas tank as I paid in 2018 when I came here and saw this board for the first time in 16 years do what was right. So my gas price is up 50% this year over that time, as it doubled, and I pay 15, 20% more for groceries and all these other things. What we're saying is this isn't anticipating inflation for next year and putting money on the account. This is saying we have inflation right now, and all we're doing is going to make a contribution to the death benefit of our retired educators. It seems so straightforward. I'm sad to see that people want to hide behind the administrative timelines and the research, because I even said 3 years ago, why don't you have a plan in place to keep us even with where we are, even though we are already way behind where we were in 2002. All of the programs CalSTRS works on behalf of the retired educators, are fabulous opportunities to help the most needy. A 100-year-old person receiving a paltry pension would benefit a few extra dollars. Those in their 90s, those in their 80s, those in their 70s, even with 85%, 90, 95% pension protection, why can't we make a one-time opportunity to help people at the worst time in their family's life when they have to say goodbye to them? It just seems so logical that it ought to be the 10%, it ought to be 20% to bring us back up. But I applaud Ms. Yamamoto for making a motion. I was a little saddened to see how long it took to take a second. Please pass her motion.
Thank you for your comment. That is the conclusion of comments for item 5.
Thank you to the members of the public for your comments. Ms. Hendricks.
Yeah, and I appreciate members from the public, and I think I've become, I think many of us on the board have lost people, and I know all members that are watching have lost loved ones, family members, and just recognize that that is an incredible, mental toll, but financial toll on our members. So, and Karen, I want to lend support to your motion. I think the issue, so it's not about the increase piece, it's really about the process, and I think that if we're committing to looking in benefits and services on this issue of, I do think we should decide as a board, are we going to tie this to inflation? Because we've kind of done that each year, but we haven't really had a conversation as a board to direct staff and say, this is what we want to tie it to. So I think that's what I'm looking for, is it's not about, we think the increase is good or bad, but it's more about consistency, and that we have something, a process to tie it to. So it's not just, the same, the conversation that we tend to be stuck in. So with that, I would lend support to the increase of 6.5% this year. If we're going to make the conversation in benefits and services tied to inflation and some of the requests that Gail, Ms. Miller proposed.
Roll and repeat the motion for us, please, Jennifer.
Sure, the motion is to increase the lump sum death benefit by 6.5%, including all the actuarial.
Is it 6.5 or 6.25?
6.5%. Okay. To the amounts listed in the table on page 3.
6.5. Thank you.
Page 3,
Jennifer.
the write-ups.
Roll, please.
Ms. Piquin?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Yamamoto?
Aye.
Mr. Tang?
Yes.
Ms. Hendricks?
Yes.
Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Ms. Erden?
Yes.
Mr. Ruffino?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
No.
Chairperson Keeley, do you care to vote?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Bring us to the next item.
We'll move to item 6. I had prepared a few slides. I think in the interest of time, unless there are any objections, I will just be brief. So this is our every 2-year review of the Supplemental Benefit Maintenance Account Program. That's CalSTRS Inflation Protection Program, extremely important right now. This is one of those where by law, as a board, you have the authority to set the purchasing power protection level to anywhere between 80 and 85%. You've had this authority for more than 10 years now. It's always been set at 85%. What we do is we compare current assets and future contributions yet to be collected to the obligations of the program. For the last few years we've had excess resources in that program. Again, this year the excess resources went up from about 11.2 billion to 11.9 billion. All that information is in the board item, and based on the information and the work performed by Milliman, we are recommending that we keep the purchasing power at 85% once again. So that is the motion in front of you.
Great, thank you, David. So there's a recommendation by staff. I'd entertain a motion to approve that. Is there Ms. Hendricks?
I'd move approval.
Okay, Ms. Hendricks has moved approval of the staff recommendation. Ms. Miller was a second. Seeing no hands or names in the queue, Jennifer, would you take the roll, please?
Sure. Ms. Piquin?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Yamamoto?
Aye.
Mr. Kang?
Yes.
Ms. Hendricks?
Yes.
Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Ms. Erden?
Yes.
Mr. Ruffino?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Chairperson Keeley, do you care to vote?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you.
Sorry, perfect. Last one. We're almost done here. Item 7, which is tied to item 6. The law states that when we perform the assessment for the SBMA program, if we identify excess resources, which we did in item 6, we then have to provide a report to the legislature on options on how to use those excess resources. So as we've done for the last few years, we've actually included 2 options this year. Option 1, I just want to point out that is exactly the same, that is the option that mirrors SB 868 that is currently being proposed at the legislature that you voted on in March to support. Option 2 is an option we've included every year in that report, which is provide cost information and the impact on the program if the purchasing power was raised anywhere between 86 to 90%. So because of the position you took on SB 868, we are recommending that you approve providing the report on those 2 options to the legislature and support option 1, which mirrors SB 868. So that is the recommendation in front of you, which you can find on page 6 of the item.
Thank you, David. So there's a recommendation by staff, as David mentioned, on page 6 of the item. Any questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Miller?
No questions. We're just going to abstain from this item because we'll have an opportunity to review it through the legislative process.
Thanks, Ms. Miller. Anyone want to move the item?
I will move it. I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Karen, seconded by Denise. Seeing no hands. Jennifer, take the roll, please.
Sure. Ms. Piquin?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Yamamoto?
Aye.
Mr. Kang?
Yes.
Ms. Hendricks?
Yes.
Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Ms. Erden?
Yes.
Mr. Ruffino?
Yes.
Ms. Miller? Abstain. Chairperson Keeley, do you care to vote? The motion passes.
There is a comment on item 7.
And, item number 7. Mr. Folia, nice to see you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I wish I would have been here at your last meeting when you passed SBMA option 1. I just want to thank the board for this journey that brought us to this point. We sometimes get comments to the board saying, you know, what are you doing? You're not listening. You listened. And you came up with a plan that we now have a Bill 868. I take great pride in that because we brought the subject up. Now, today, it's everybody's idea. What that means that we've been successful. Okay? So, but the thing is could not have been done if we didn't have a responsible board to take an action that's going to benefit 55,000 members that are members of CalSTRS. And because of that, I just want to just take a personal thank you. And David Lamoureux especially, because he was the one that listened to our cries for change and our cries for help. And so, it's so good to be back. But I can remember not too long ago, lines of people complaining that you're not listening. Well, I want to tell you, you were listening and you acted. And I can, in testimony before the PERS committee on the Senate side, we're getting good reaction, bipartisan. I haven't heard anyone saying they didn't like this idea. It's a responsible way to take care of those who've served the state of California in such a way to bring us to a point where we are considered the best. And I just want to say again, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Folia. Thank you, guys. Thank you. So we're going to go to our next item, the state ledge, state and federal legislation. Joycelyn Martinez-Wade. Hey, Joycelyn.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I have 3 bills before you today to take positions on. I will look to the vice chair for what order to go in, if you'd like to start at the top of the agenda. Excellent. So at the top of the agenda, we have SB 1328, and I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the terrible war on the Ukraine that's happening right now. And as Russia began its invasion back at the end of February, the investment staff determined the risks to the portfolio, as they're doing all of the time, and worked with the external managers, given the ESG risk factors related to war, and they made immediate shifts in the portfolio, reducing exposure to direct investments in Russia. SB 1328 goes far beyond this, requiring divestment from any company with business operations that provide revenue to the governments of Russia or Belarus, among other provisions. It's quite an expansive bill, and this expansive criteria means our exposure is approximately $96 billion in global equity and fixed income, and our initial administrative costs are at $821 million. And so the staff recommendation at this point in time is to oppose, based on the board's policy, to oppose legislation that infringes on the plenary authority and the investment authority of the board. I think that allows for public comment on each if there is any as well. Yes. Sure.
I see you, Blake. Go ahead, Blake.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Joycelyn. Quick question. First off, commend Chris and his team for being nimble at a place like greatly limiting Russian holdings at the start of the war. Have you all engaged with the author's office regarding your concerns, which I understand are grave?
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Yes, we've spoken to staff in the author's office, and so we're continuing those conversations. At this point in time, there haven't been any indications that there will be narrowing the bill or making any other shifts. I think they were taking the information we provided back to the senator to consider.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Ruffino.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. The treasurer of the State of California supports Senate Bill 1328. As long as these directives don't contradict the fiduciary responsibility of the fund. It is also important to point out that there is a clause within the language of the bill which allows the boards, both boards, CalSTRS and CalPERS, to not take any action on divestment unless the board determines in good faith that the action is consistent with the board's fiduciary responsibility established in the California Constitution. This means that the bill will not impede the pension fund's abilities to invest and provide maximum return to its members. With these important fiduciary guardrails in place, the Treasurer supports SB 1328 and commends the author and the stakeholders for their leadership and engagement in this important topic. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Frank.
Ms. Paquin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, the controller also has grave concerns about what's happening in Ukraine with the Russian investments, but also recognizes that the fiduciary duty of the board is to ensure benefits for the members. And from what we understand from the staff report, this far-reaching bill would put about $185 billion of our investments at stake. Is that correct, Jocelyn?
Approximately $96 billion, and that's in global equities and fixed income.
96 billion, okay, thank you. And also, we have a concern too about the exit clauses for this bill. And, you know, I think that in the past, Mr. Elman has talked about how difficult it is to reinvest once the divestment has lifted. And I was wondering if staff could provide any kind of input on that as well.
We've discussed them at a high level, where the exit clauses that are included, if you will, frame situations that may or may not really occur. And so we've talked about that with the author's office a little bit, but that's not something we've dug into any deeper.
And so this, at this point, they have not made any changes on those exit clauses. I think that the concerns are just so great that the controller cannot support this bill, and does support the staff's recommendation to oppose the bill. It does put the fiduciary duty of the fund at risk and the board's fiduciary duty at risk. And it's, CalSTRS has been complying with everything they need to be complying with the federal sanctions against Russia in this case, and I have every confidence that you will continue to do so. Thank you.
Ms. Paquin? Don't see anyone else in the queue. Joycelyn, do we want to take each one individually? Okay. Okay.
And then we have public comment.
So there's a staff recommendation on this bill. Ms. Miller?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, that we're going to abstain on this, all issues of legislation as well. I will just add that the team's immediate ability to pivot in terms of limiting investments in Russia, and I will say how pernicious they were in terms of investments and their ability to sort of see where the market was going was really impressive. So blunt instruments often don't get the results we need, but I do think that their ability to really act quickly as soon as the war began was pretty remarkable. So thank you for that. But again, we'll be abstaining from this measure.
Thank you, Ms. Miller.
I move support position of staff's recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bradford.
Second.
It's seconded by Ms. Tang.
Right, I was going to say.
I wasn't clear.
So, Ms. Bradford, to be clear, you're moving the staff recommendation.
Correct.
Okay, Ms. Bradford has moved the staff recommendation on this bill. It's been seconded by Mr. Tang. Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, Jennifer, would you take the roll, please?
I do have one public comment.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
For one public comment, if we could get a 3-minute timer, please.
Okay, so our comment is from Mary Kay.
Good morning, CalSTRS Board. My name is Mary Kay Scheid, and I am the Vice Chair of the Retirement Committee for the California Teachers Association. We wanted to ensure that the CalSTRS Board is aware that CTA supports SB 1343 by Senator Leyva, which requires all charter schools to participate in CalSTRS and CalPERS, providing retirement security for all California public charter school employees and strengthening the financial health of both retirement systems. Unlike a traditional public school, a charter school can select whether to allow its employees to join the state's public pension system or offer an alternative retirement benefit, such as Social Security or a 401k. Since the enactment of the 2014 CalSTRS funding plan, an increasing number of charter schools are choosing alternative retirement benefit options because of the increased costs associated with the state's public retirement system. Before the 2014 CalSTRS funding plan was adopted, only about 10% of newly created charter schools each year chose not to participate in CalSTRS. Since the funding plan's enactment, however, nearly 33% of newly created charter schools each year choose not to allow their employees to participate in CalSTRS. The employer contribution rate for all government entities increases over time as more and more charter schools refuse to allow their employees to participate. In some instances, charter employees are not made aware of their limited retirement options until after they have provided decades of service. Moreover, teachers who must switch between public schools with and without CalSTRS may not realize the detriment to their retirement security until very late in their careers. A well-managed pension certainly provides the greatest retirement security for public employees. Charter schools funded with public dollars should ensure that their employees are afforded the same retirement opportunities as all other public employees. Thank you.
Joycelyn, I had stepped out at the beginning of your item. That bill has not been addressed yet to the board?
Correct.
Okay, so we're going to come back to that in a moment. Obviously, those comments were on a separate bill that we'll be speaking to in a moment around charter schools and requiring employers to enroll their members in CalSTRS in charter schools. So we'll come back to that. But for this item, there is a motion on the floor to support the staff recommendation by Ms. Bradford, seconded by Mr. Tang. Jennifer, would you take the roll, please?
Ms. Bigwin?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson? Ms. Yamamoto?
Aye.
Mr. Tang?
Yes.
Ms. Hendricks?
Yes.
Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Ms. Erden?
Yes.
Mr. Ruffino?
No.
And Ms. Miller, abstain. And Chairperson Keeley, care to vote?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Our next bill, Joycelyn?
Great, thank you very much. SB 1343 is next. You've gotten a preview of that, but just to cover it quickly, it requires charter schools that are newly authorized starting in 2023 to have their employees be either members of CalSTRS or CalPERS as appropriate based on the service they're performing. It also provides a mechanism for the employer that reports directly to the system for that school to set aside a portion of the charter school's apportionment on a rolling basis to cover contributions and penalties and interest if necessary. And as you can see in the analysis, that was a neutral if amended recommendation. The author has actually taken those amendments, so I would like to request a neutral position from the board, as this bill does not have any significant or adverse impacts to the benefits, services, or administration of the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Joycelyn. Any questions or comments? Want to log in? There you go. Ms. Bradford.
Thank you. I would like to move a substitute motion of support for this bill. I believe we're all here for the retirement security of teachers, and charter schools are not participating in CalSTRS, and teachers are moving around. Pretty much everything Mary Kay just said is really happening in the real world. New teachers start out in a charter school, have no idea they're not in CalSTRS and don't really understand, and I think that we should be supportive of all teachers having a secure retirement.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been, Ms. Bradford has moved a substitute motion, which is to support the bill. It's been seconded by Mr. Tang. Do we have any discussions or questions on the substitute motion? I believe, Joycelyn, when we spoke about this this bill in particular, there potentially could be additional staff support that's necessary given the detail around the charter schools. It's a little bit more nuanced and complicated, a demand on the staff.
Yes.
So if this motion is passed and that is an additional burden that's brought to you and your team, I think you need to communicate that with us and to be sure that the appropriate staff, and I'm sure Cassandra and the team will think about how you're deploying resources to be sure that it's not an unnecessary burden and creating more complications for us as a system. I think Ms. Bradford spoke to the point of a secure retirement, and I think your words, in the real world, these things are actually happening, and our mission and purpose is the retirement security of California's educators, and the research is clear. The single best thing for retirement for California's educators is a defined benefit pension, and the growing issues in charter schools not being in defined benefit plans is counter to that mission. Cassandra?
Yeah, we're going through our review process on our resource needs as we're going to be preparing our budget next year. So we will, if this passes, then we would just include the consideration of those resource demands at that time.
Great, thank you so much. Let's see, Jennifer?
I may withdraw my question here. It was along the lines of what I was interested to know, to what degree we can know at this time, what the cost and needs would be and our confidence in being able to, I fully support the mission and everything that was expressed. And if we have any additional comment on that, great, but I don't want to put anyone on the spot as I realize we may not have all of that right now.
Right now, we have estimates of approximately 3 staff that we would need in addition to what we already have in certain divisions. So we're looking at 2 staff for the financial services branch to handle contributions and things that are coming in of that nature. And then it's between 1/2 and half a staff person for benefits and services, probably on the reporting side, employer services. And the cost is approximately $328,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. So I don't see any other members of the board in the queue, so seeing no one else, there is a substitute motion on the floor to support this bill, and it's been properly seconded. So Jennifer, would you take the roll, please?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Yamamoto?
Aye.
Mr. Tang?
Yes.
Ms. Hendricks?
Yes.
Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Ms. Erden?
Yes.
Mr. Rufino?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Abstain, please.
Chairperson Keeley, do you care to vote?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Joycelyn?
Thank you. Last but not least, SB 1402 allows CalSTRS members to purchase up to 4 years of service credit for military service prior to membership, which currently is not available to our members. There are also additional parameters around this, but it is pretty straightforward. So the staff recommendation is neutral because the legislation does not significantly or adversely impact the benefits, services, or administration of the system.
So the staff recommendation is neutral. Don't see any names. So entertain a motion to support the staff's recommendation. Is there a motion? Okay, it's moved by Mr. Tang, seconded by Mr. Johnson. Jennifer, would you take the roll, please?
Sure, Ms. Piquin?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Yamamoto?
Aye.
Mr. Tang?
Aye.
Ms. Hendricks?
Yes.
Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Ms. Erden?
Yes.
Mr. Rufino?
Yes.
Ms. Miller? Chairperson Keeley, do you care to vote?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Thanks, Joycelyn.
Great, thank you very much.
Item 9 is the work plan input. And this is just a reminder, as Cassandra's going to cover this item, this is the beginning of the process for thinking about items that would be on our work plan for next year. So between now and July, there's opportunity for direct feedback to myself or Cassandra to think about what would be on the work plan for next year. And I know staff identified 3 ongoing issues for us. So I'll turn it over to you now, Cassandra.
Thank you, Chair Keeley.
Really, the work plan contains the ongoing operational responsibilities and oversights of the board is associated with what we would be you would be taking information on and taking action on throughout the year. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that are coming up this year that are new. One is the work that we did in April at the offsite. We had a presentation on updating and integrating sustainability principles across the enterprise, and that will continue on as ongoing work associated with the strategic planning process and what the board discussed as their preference in participating in the activities and work associated with that. We have that twice in September and March on the work plan. We also have board elections coming up in September, so that is a cycle every 4 years, and there's an action item that the board will need to take associated with that. There are some changes and suggestions that the board is going to be considering in the board governance committee, working with your board governance consultant, that we will be discussing in the committee later on tomorrow. So if there's any additional changes associated with that, we will incorporate that in the final version of the meeting in for adoption in July. The other thing I just wanted to point out is that the compensation committee work is being subsumed into the full board's work plan this year, and all of the regular ongoing responsibilities associated with the activities in the compensation committee are on this work plan. A couple of things that are not on the work plan are still being discussed associated with some of the incentive plan proposals that we've discussed and the evaluation of a salary survey and analysis and benchmarking of our current salary. So those are things that we're discussing, and if there is a decision to put those back on the board for next year, then we will have that on there for the next year's plan.
Thanks, Cassandra. Any questions, comments about process and what's next? Karen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Cassandra, in September, you mentioned the board elections. Is that, can you?
I'm sorry.
I guess I'm not understanding the difference between that and what we did today.
It's the seats that are up for the elections for the teachers.
That's what I thought.
Right, and it's the preparation for the next year's election, and they have to take action on initiating the process. Yep.
Jennifer?
One question, as we think ahead to the work plan is in our theme of adaptability, flexibility, and while maintaining an absolute focus with our transparency, our effectiveness. When we look at the work plan, we'll see certain things that must occur at certain times of the year. As we adopt it, will the spirit be with, as needed, as it makes sense, wise and thoughtful, adaptability and flexibility as well?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that some of this conversation will be happening in the Board Governance Committee to evaluate where we can become more efficient on items of routine work that the board is taking on. Some of it's just receiving information, regular reports, providing the documentation not only to you, but to our public members, and making sure that when action items are presented, that those are the ones that the board spends time on, and that we be efficient in consolidating the work in a manner that we can not maybe have so many meetings in concurrent months that take so much time and preparation. We're looking at we don't have anything in the April offsite this year, and there's a recommendation in the governance committee to have that every 3 years. And then we'll look at if there's any other efficiencies that we can accomplish through this next year to see if we can reduce even another meeting possibly.
Yeah, and I think for Ken in particular, what we do when we adopt the work plan, it really outlines the goals and objectives for the year, and we like to stay disciplined to that. But we also, as Jennifer alluded to, as issues come up that are really deserving of time, we maintain that flexibility to be able to add. And I think we're in a great spot now where we can really think about, and through the governance committee, some of these items that are mandatory or things that are winding up on agendas that possibly we can be a little bit more thoughtful about how they're delivered, so that we maybe free up time on our agendas as we're thinking about it. So Suggestions and ideas are always welcome for change, and if they work and they're helpful, we'll adopt them, and if they're not, we can always go back to it.
And with the flexibility to add, importantly.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so thanks, Cassandra. Item 10 is the consent agenda. Are there any polls from the consent agenda? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. Consent information items. Any polls for 11 or 12? Don't see any.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, it's okay.
Just on the actuarial pieces that we're approving, not to belabor this point even more, but on both in 10 and the minimum interest rate and the actuarial valuation, if we're going to sort of include inflation in everything we're doing, we're going to, again, like these probably in the future, Mr. Lammer, are going to have to be updated because they really are kind of no longer accurate now. So I just really want to caution that we need an understanding of inflation in all of these. I think we can approve them today, but I would ask for an information request about sort of what inflation now does to minimum interest rates and other pieces, because it's a pretty, it can get a little bit complicated. So thank you.
Okay.
But I
Jennifer, you
I
make
still
sure
think
that
it's important to approve it. I just want to add that I think that's information we're going to need going forward.
Yeah, and I'm sure Jennifer captured that for the minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. So item 13, items referred by the committee for board decision. None, right? Thank you. New business or review of information requests?
I have a couple from item 2, the precise reporting on the contingency budget and the timing information for the bond issuance. Item 4A, there was the request for the community college enrollment factors. And then also to include the teachers in the workforce and as a monitoring the risk as an add-on. And item 5, I have the request for the Benefits and Services Committee to take on the research regarding the lump sum death benefits.
Great, thank you.
And then Gail's
And
last
the
report.
added on about the inflation for items 10E and 11.
Thank you. Anything from item 15, Cassandra, that you want to highlight for the July meeting?
No, it's really just a business planning meeting to initiate and kick off the year, so we'll adopt the work plan, and then we will provide an information summary of the business plan for the next year, so it's pretty straightforward.
Thanks. Item 16, are there any members of the public that would like to address us for items that are not on our agenda this morning?
There are no members of the public.
Well, I see Mr. Foley moving in the back.
I apologize.
No, it's okay. No, he didn't submit his name. Don't worry.
Samantha, so it's okay.
That's all right, Samantha.
I didn't move fast enough when we had the legislative report. I just want to call to the board's attention the repeal of GPO WEP is still alive and well. I wanted to call the board's attention that there is a bill that has been introduced in the House, H.R. 5723. It's a bill that is a comprehensive Social Security, strengthening of Social Security, plus the repeal of GPO WEP. It also provides a funding mechanism by lifting the cap for those that can afford to pay FICA of $400,000 a year or above. And so I wanted to bring that to your attention because there is also a joint resolution, a Senate joint resolution in our that had passed the Senate, State Senate, that is Joint Resolution 11, that is support of H.R. 5723 and Senate Bill 3071. Currently, every member of the California delegation that are Democrats have supported this particular measure. It is now being looked at in the Ways and Means and has an excellent chance of going to the floor and then going on into the Senate. I bring that to your attention because although we're not into Social Security, we are into repeal of GPO-WEP. I just want to let you know that something is happening. This is the best chance we've had in over 20 years of getting something done. This depends when we get over to the Senate. I think through budget reconciliation, we might be able to get 10 votes to get this thing into law and finally repeal GPO-WEP. So that's for the board's information. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Mr. Ruffino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a point of, if I may, a point of personal privilege, Mr. Chair. So two things. The first one, this week we celebrate a Public Service Recognition Week. And for those of you who don't know, that was established by Congress, and it was designed to honor the men and women who serve our nation at the federal, at the state, at the county, and local government. And so I want to take the opportunity to thank one and all, who have dedicated their careers to public service, especially our teachers, which I remember every single one of mine very dearly, and of course, our entire CalSTRS staff. Thank you for your service. The second thing, real quick, Mr. Chair, May is also a time that we recognize our AAPI heritage. And that's when we recognize and honor the significant historical, social, and cultural impact that generations of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders have made to our country. And so I'd like to especially recognize today our very own Ken Tang, Karen Yakamoto, who are serving on our board, and all of our AAPI staff that work for CalSTRS and just today, and for in every sector. So happy AAPI Heritage Month, and to all of our colleagues.
Hello.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Mr. Ruffino. So with that, we are going to go to lunch. Cassandra, can you just outline the rest of the day for us, please? I know there's a tour, and then we've got some time to close.
We will have a tour with facilitating that with some of the facility staff, with hard hats and safety gear for the board members who want to participate in that. And then we will have we'll have lunch, and then the remainder of the day will be in closed session in the caucus room. So the board will be in closed session, and then we will adjourn for the entire day after closed session.
We don't have.
And there's then
I'm sorry,
benefits and
the board, I'm sorry. We have another, then we'll go into Benefits and Services Committee, sorry.
So later in the afternoon.
Yeah,
2:45. 2:45, is it?
I think that it'll probably, with flexibility, of course.
Yes, great. So everyone have a terrific lunch and a great break. We'll be back, Benefits and Services around 2:45 p.m.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Benefits and Services Committee, ready to start. Will you please take the roll, please?
Worse. Ms. Paquin, representing the State Controller. Mr. Johnson, representing the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. Mr. Tang.
Here.
Ms. Hendricks.
Here.
Ms. Bradford.
Here.
Ms. Erdan.
Here.
Mr. Ruffino, representing the State Treasurer.
Present.
And Ms. Miller, representing the Director of Finance.
Here.
Chairperson Yamamoto, you have a quorum.
Thank you. And you have something to read to us?
I sure do.
Thank you.
The CalSTRS board meetings are live web streamed, video archived, and available to the public on calstrs.com. Individuals who wish to address the board should wait for the 10-minute public comment period at the end of the agenda item the speaker wishes to address. For comments not pertaining to a specific agenda item, there will be an opportunity for additional statements at the end of the open session. Each speaker is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes to comment. However, if there is not enough time for each speaker to have 3 minutes, the timing will be at the discretion of the chair. To protect the privacy of speakers under the age of 18 who wish to address the board, only their first name and affiliated organization may be provided, but other personal identifying information, such as their last name, age, or school, may.
Is that it? Good. Everybody got that? Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 1, the approval of the agenda. So everybody take a look, see if it's okay with flexibility, because I noticed the time is different, but
Did you know
March
the time
on.
was different, Madam
Okay,
Chair?
all right. Okay. Without any objection, our agenda has been approved. Thank you. We'll go on to number 2, the consent agenda, approval of the minutes of the January 27th Benefits and Services Committee meeting. Any corrections, comments? Anything, additions? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and adopt the approval of the minutes. Okay, now comes a real interesting part, item number 3, the member segmentation study. Tom Buffalo. I'm sure he's going to tell us what segmentation is, so not to worry.
It's in the name.
The segmentation of what?
Exactly.
Hi, Tom.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Tom Buffalo. I'm the head of research at CalSTRS. So this afternoon, I'll be presenting the segmentation study, our member segmentation study. Trying to advance here. There we go. Back one. There we go. So a little background on this research. Over a decade ago, we conducted persona research. At that time, we hired an external firm who actually went out to members' homes, did interviews with them, and the end result of that research were personas, different kind of embodiments of the membership of different types of members. And that information has been used within the organization since then to kind of help interact and correspond with our membership. So that was the 2010 persona research. And then in 2020, more recently, we did our demographic study, which was a comprehensive census of our membership. And so the member segmentation study is actually an extension of those two research efforts. The goal here really was to identify distinct member groups within our population, develop refresh personas around them, and use those to help better understand our members and communicate with them. So segmentation analysis, it's just an analysis of our members based on demographic, behavioral, and psychographic criteria. So segments represent groups of members who have similar characteristics, but they're actually close enough to each other but different from other members. And so they cluster together using this statistical algorithm that we use to conduct the segmentation analysis. But essentially we identify unique member groups, and that guided the development of the personas that we then created from that. And the personas provide a way for us to relate to members, and like I mentioned, it provides a lens for us for when we interact and correspond with our members. So the survey, actually, we were using an electronic survey to conduct this research. It went out at this time last year. We sent about 132,000 emails, of which a little over 2,900 members responded to our research, and we use those responses thus to then create our member segments. Here's just a list of some of the variables that went into it, quite a few. Again, the members' responses to these variables, some of them were responses to the survey, some of them were data that we actually pulled from the system, but then these were used again through a clustering kind of statistical performance to identify how they're similar and then also how they're different from other members, and thus they group together into the segments that we'll talk about here. Okay, so we landed with 5 different member segments named as such. So there was a single with student loan debt that represented about 19% of those who responded. And we'll get into a little detail about each one of these in the ensuing slides. There was family life and mortgage, also about 19% of those who responded. 25% of those who responded we refer to as seeking retirement knowledge. 21% secure in retirement, and 16% retired and self-supported. One of the main differences between this segmentation study and then the personas from over a decade ago is we actually segmented the entire population from our youngest active to our oldest retired. The original persona actually only just studied active members, so took it a step farther this time, and now we've identified 2 additional segments of our retired population, the secure in retirement and retired and self-supported. Also, interestingly, that 25% of seeking retired knowledge includes a few actives, or some actives and some retired. So it's an interesting amalgam of the 2 groups. Okay, so a couple of snippets from each one of these segments. Single with student loan debt, very descriptive, but they're active members, likely under 40 years old, never been married, don't have any financial dependents, most likely renting, maybe even living rent-free. They do have the lowest household income of all segments. They tend to lack confidence regarding retirement planning. That's not surprising to us. Through our other member research, we've discovered that as well. Younger members tend to have less confidence. Older members tend to have more confidence around their retirement. And interestingly, they're unlikely to read emails or publications from us, and they dislike receiving the print material, suggesting that they think it's actually kind of wasteful to use paper. Family life and mortgage, active members 44 years and older, 44 years on average, I should say. Over half have a spouse and partner, dependent children, own a mortgage. Equal decision makers in the household, they do have the highest income of these segments. More likely to plan on relying on a spouse's income in retirement, so thinking about the dual combination of streams of income in retirement. And because of their sort of busy lifestyle, if you will, they are more likely, or the most likely of all the groups, to actually access CalSTRS via their mobile phones. Seeking retirement knowledge. This is, like I mentioned, a mix of active and retired members, average age of 55. 1 in 5 are actually married to another CalSTRS member. They are the most educated of our groups, of our member segments. They have the most master's and doctorate degrees. Not as uncomfortable with debt as other segments. I think they sort of realize sometimes the necessity of carrying debt at times as a financial vehicle, financial tool to reach your goals. Looking for financial information, they do have a higher understanding of the benefits than other segments, again, because they are closer to that finish line, if you will, and they have the highest balance in their retirement plans. Secure in retirement, these members about 75 years old on average, 2/3 spent their entire career in teaching, they're married, likely to have little or no household debt, high financial confidence for retirement. Like I mentioned, that's another pattern we've seen through our other research, and they do kind of rely on their CalSTRS benefit along with their spouse's DB or other savings or Social Security. Retired and self-supported, these are members average age 77, 3/4 live alone and are widowed or divorced. Both household income and retirement savings plans balances are relatively low. Not surprising because they've spent some time actually depleting those over time. Over half have no debt. Their primary source of income is their CalSTRS benefit. Overall, satisfied with their quality of life in retirement and confidence in living comfortably in retirement. So general findings from our segmentation research, nearly half of respondents across all segments are interested in reducing debt and putting money into a supplemental plan. I think that's fairly universal knowledge. I think a lot of us may have that particular goal. And they do prefer to communicate with us through My CalSTRS, but also .com and through email. So next steps, we have a couple things going on in relation to this. Our communications team are producing internal reference sheets that our staff can use when interacting and corresponding with our members. So that provides a little sharper lens on those activities. And then we're actually not done. This is the beginning of our study of our segments. We have built a tool that allows us to segment respondents to our other research. And so we can compare them side by side alongside questions we've asked in the past, along with how do these segments now answer the questions that we we ask today, and how do we compare them to kind of our old ways of studying our membership. Like I said, it does just provide us a refreshed lens on how we interact and correspond with our membership, and more to come. With that, happy to take any questions.
Wow, interesting, interesting. Any questions for anyone? No questions? Lots of information, lots of good information, and look forward to more, so thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you. Okay. On deck now is employer engagement and outreach, item number 4. Jeff?
With some new eyewear, apparently.
Yeah, hi, Jeff.
Or at least it's been 2 years, so.
Yeah.
I do like those new glasses.
Yeah, they're nice.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I need them now.
Join the club, join the club.
I couldn't wear them with a mask.
Oh,
Anything because everything was getting foggy. Anyway, common problems for the common era. Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Zimmer. I support Employer Services as their director, and today I would like to talk to you about our employer engagement and outreach efforts. Always like to set the table for the geographic scope and magnitude of employer reporting. So you can see almost 1,800 districts, more than 90 report sources submitting almost 13 million lines per year that come from our employer partners. And I mentioned employer partners, kind of a new term that we're using to reflect and acknowledge the partnership that we have with our employers in our shared mission of making sure we have accurate retirement benefits for our members. And along these lines, we've rebranded our program area. So in the recent past, we're now called Employer Services. And all the teams in Employer Services worked on creating a mission statement. And that mission statement is we build relationships with employers and business partners by providing service and education that lead to accurate contribution reporting and member benefits. So hidden in plain sight there, 3 main themes: service, education, and accuracy. Anything we do should relate to one of those themes, or maybe it's not worth doing. So it's got to be related to service, education, and accuracy to be important to us and meet our employers' needs, as well as the needs of our members. So the relationships, I'll talk about the relationships now. All of these slides are how we have points of engagement and outreach with our employer partners to build those relationships. So I'll start with something new that we've done. This is in the last fiscal year. These are high-touch communications with our report sources. These are conference calls. So we have 4 employer help teams, and they're all dedicated to different report sources, different county offices of education or direct reports if it's a large district. And they facilitate these calls kind of on an ad hoc basis, or we schedule them quarterly. And the purpose here is to get feedback, gather questions, discuss current topics. We might invite other teams or trainers from Employer Services to join the call to discuss legislation or audit findings that are relevant to the audience. So we do about 10 a month, as you can see, and what we've seen is they're very effective in the increased efficiency of resolving complex cases or inquiries, because what would have otherwise required 2 to 3 weeks of emails back and forth can be taken care of in a collaborative conversation. So something new that we've added and received good feedback from our employer partners about this. One of our most critical outreach efforts is after an audit. So CalSTRS Audit Services performs audits, and they hand off the audit report to the audit resolution team in Employer Services. It is the expectation of that team that they follow up every single one of those audits with information and guidance about the findings contained in the audit, as well as information about how to potentially correct and re-report information required because of those findings. So as you can see, in the last fiscal year and fiscal year to date, Audit Services has given us 129 audit reports, and the team has met their goal of responding to each of them with post-audit guidance. There's also collaboration with our training and development team. So if the employer requests additional training beyond what's in the audit, we set that up for them with the collaboration between those 2 teams. So along with training, this is our highest volume of points of engagement. This is the day-to-day bread and butter of what we do. So those employer help teams that I mentioned before, they receive inquiries from our employer partners. And this could be, I need a password reset for the Secure Employer website, to some of the most complex reporting topics. And you can see we get about 600 of these a month. And we focus on these a lot because while some may take a few minutes, some may take a few weeks to resolve, this is our highest frequency of interaction with our employer partners. So we want to make sure that this experience is good and that we provide quality information and respond to their inquiries. And we have a deadline within 2 days that we respond to their initial inquiry. But this is really the bulk of the work for those 4 teams. And again, the highest frequency of interaction we have with our employer partners. And here's training. So obviously a huge focus on training, and this is the training that we've done for last fiscal year and fiscal year to date. So you will see we served more than 2,000 participants across more than 1,000 employers last fiscal year. In this fiscal year to date, almost 1,300 participants for 631 employers. And this is the instructor-led training, which I think is the highest value training because it allows for a dialogue, questions back and forth, specific situations that we can unravel and unpack with the students that are in the course. And of course, there's computer-based training modules as well that employers can use in self-serve at their own pace when they need it, if they need a refresher. But this is obviously where we focus a lot of our energy. And we've been able to do this instructor-led training remotely over the last couple of years, which has actually been a nice addition to our service offerings because we can continue to do this in the future, even when we start visiting sites again. So this is obviously a huge effort for us that we're always trying to deliver, and we receive feedback from these after training surveys, so we have a good idea of how these go, but we're always trying to improve them. And one of the things I wanted to mention today is something that we've recently done, just a couple of weeks ago in April. We wanted to do specific charter school training. We wanted to reach that audience in ways that maybe we haven't before. So we had 2 days of sessions. And over the course of those 2 days, more than 100 charter schools, almost 200 participants. And it was great to give them just the overall training that we provide. Creditable service, creditable compensation, membership, those high-level concepts that's important for them to get their reporting correct so they funnel it up to their third-party administrator, the district, the county, how it gets to us. What we found most important was the questions. They had so many questions, and we were able to hear their questions that are specific to their situations and then incorporate that into future training and improve the training for this audience because it's an audience that we want to continue to reach and have more of these sessions to this specific charter school audience. So it's something that we've added just recently that we want to continue to do. It's on our curriculum and it's on the menu now. So after all of these points of engagement in the outreach, we want to survey our employer partners to see if they're satisfied with what we offer. So we've been doing an annual survey for the past 5 years. You can see it's increased over time, with last year having the highest rate of employers reporting high satisfaction. And we're doing a survey right now. Our survey research and analysis team is working with us to launch this year's survey in May. But it's going to be different. So on that note, we're asking different questions now. So because of all the different experiences that employer partners have with us, we want to ask deeper questions of them. We always want to have high satisfaction, absolutely. But the commentary that we receive and the verbal feedback that we get really gives us insight to what they need and suggestions that we can improve on. That's important to us. So in line with the focus on customer experience in the new CalSTRS strategic plan, we're going to be working on that survey to get deeper into their journeys. We're going to ask questions about level of effort and get a net promoter score. And the journeys that we're most focused on for the employer are monthly reporting. That's that 13 million, the accumulated 13 million lines of data per year. That's their monthly reporting, the bulk of the work, the bulk of the interaction. Reacting to an audit, and of course, education. So those are 3 major journeys for an employer. So we want to ask questions about those journeys and their satisfaction with them and learn from them what we can to make those better and improve those journeys. So the survey may be different. The results may be different next year, so we can't really compare it year over year, but I think this is a great evolution to get more information about the services that we provide. I think it's necessary, and I appreciate the help from our survey research and analysis group on getting that started. And similarly, we always have a goal to better understand employer needs, their challenges, and their practices. just on the ground, what's happening at an employer's site. What challenges are they having? Obviously, last year was big on teacher shortages. That was something that they were dealing with the whole year long. So how can we learn more about how an employer operates to predict their needs and anticipate what they may be and provide services that meet them more in real time? So something that we always want to do is learn more what's going on in their business. And finally, something that we've done in the last couple of months is pilot a quality management program. And this, you saw those 600 inquiries a month, for example. So we wanted to have a level of expectation and standard set for responses to those inquiries. So a formal way of evaluating our responses. Is the tone professional? Is it done in a timely manner? And most importantly, is the information accurate? So adding a level of quality control over the responses to make sure there's a review of the information we're providing to ensure the maximum amount of quality for our employers and ultimately our members, because that's who they are reporting for. So we'll continue to do the things we did before, the conference calls, the training, the audit follow-up, all of that we'll continue to do, but these are the things that we're focused on continuing to meet our mission and again, those goals of service, accuracy, and education. And I'm open to any questions you may have. I appreciate your time.
All right, Ms. Hendricks.
So I love a good mission statement. I mean, I think that it's so important. We just did one with our local and it was, I was shocked that we didn't have one. And I think it just, I put it on everything now because I think it just kind of keeps you focused and on track. And so I love that. And it's simple. And there's these are our top 3 things and we're not going to do anything, we're going to focus on that. So I appreciate that exercise. I think that's great for your team and and I loved the mission statement. I think the perennial question that kind of comes up with employers is, all the training is so great, but the turnover issue. And so how is staff thinking about that in terms of, it's like whack-a-mole, you train someone and then they're gone. And, and so
Absolutely.
is there, what's our thinking on that and how do we, because I know we don't have control over that, but are there, I'm sure a lot of different organizations have these issues around turnover of staff. And so how do we manage that and ensure that training goes to a deeper bench to ensure we get that
And you're
quality?
right, while we can't participate or correct and influence the turnover that happens at an employer partner, what we can do is provide them tools so we can focus on that. So we have a new employee onboarding guide that we provide to them. So they say, if you have new staff, please give them this document. And it has links to different items and modules in the learning management system. So it says, hey, these are the most important law sections that you need to know right away. And giving them a roadmap to the things that are most important immediately, we thought was important. So that's something that we developed a couple of years ago that we continue to refine, and we want to increase the uptake and make it and market it more. So the employers know that they have new staff. Hey, print this out. Look at all these tools that are online. It's kind of a menu for you. You can just go through and see all the things that are most important. So that's what we've tried to do is that, again, since we can't influence or impact that, we can at least provide them as much information for someone that's new to get up to speed as quickly as possible.
Great.
That's
Is that something that we put out on a regular, I guess I just think of the turnover, the trend that we have sometimes, and
Right.
it's something that we put out on a regular basis.
We do. We market it. We talk about it in our trainings. We have the employer support portal, which is where the LMS learning management system lives, and that new employee guide is on there. So we often reference that in our materials. So we're trying to make it more available to people, and we're trying to make it better as well. So it started as just a glimmer of an idea, and as we get feedback, we can add things to it to make it more relevant to those new staff.
Awesome. Great.
Anyone else? I just have a few. So going back to the new employees, are there employers that don't contact CalSTRS, or do you contact all of them at some point, or is there a schedule that you do that? So in order that they are
Great question.
up to par?
There's obviously levels of frequency. I mean, we talk to LACO and LAUSD and San Diego and Riverside. Those are our big counties, obviously. And the more complex they are, the more conversations that we have. And Alpine, we might not talk to too often because they only have a few employees and everything stays pretty much the same. And so we try and do, and those conference calls, it's a great question, because the conference calls was a way to address that. We would schedule periodic quarterly conference calls that, hey, we want to check in with you. Now, we of course can't force them to go. So if they really don't have anything to discuss, then we don't push it too hard. But we make ourselves available to everyone. Like I said, those employer help teams are all, the staff on those teams are dedicated to different counties and different report sources. So they'll be reaching out kind of on a daily basis for those inquiries. But we're trying to find more ways to say, hey, we're here for you. If you want to talk to us, we've set up these times to talk to us. And of course, you can call anytime and have a conversation about that. So we try and make ourselves available by adding things to our menu of services like those conference calls.
So then you track it to some degree.
Exactly. We know how many we've had and who we've had them with. And if we haven't heard from someone in a while, we might give them a call and say, hey, is anything new? And so we stay current with what's going on.
Sounds good. And then I just have another question on, when you talked about the charter schools and your engagement with charter schools and everything, did you, just like, what are some of the numbers that you came up with? How many, besides of what you said, is it, there's legislation right now, or there's talk about legislation about charter schools being part of CalSTRS. How many were in CalSTRS at all, or were you only talking to the charter schools that were in CalSTRS?
Yes, the ones that currently have a reporting relationship with us, either through their third-party administrator or through the county. So we wanted to reach the ones that are already participating in CalSTRS to make sure they understood the program and the reporting requirements that they would be subject to. So we wanted to get the charter schools that are already engaged with us.
Right, okay.
Yeah, that was our population. And we'll continue, I mean, there's 1,100 charter schools, I think. I forget the count. There's a lot of them. And we saw 100 of them. And we obviously, that's 10% of them. We're getting there, but this is an audience that we want to continue to engage with.
So the only ones that are in CalSTRS right now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the queue? Anyone else have any other questions? No? Great. All right, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your work.
I appreciate it.
Wow, that's neat, huh? Item number 5, committee work plan. We're doing really well, folks. Come on, Bill Perez.
You got the notes from Harry, right, on things he wanted on the benefits and services? He sent you an email a while back. Do you remember that?
No.
Okay.
No.
It's okay.
Okay.
No problem.
All right.
Madam Chair, members of the board, good afternoon. Bill Perez, Chief Benefits Officer. And wanted to briefly touch upon the items that we were going to be covering for the next fiscal year. In light of our conversation earlier today on the lump sum death benefit, we will be adding that to the currently posted agenda with a follow-up presentation and potentially recommendations of what we may be looking at in terms of a revision on an annualized basis for that. In addition to that, on research items, we'll be looking at an update on the triennial health study, as well as in January, a presentation of the annual member satisfaction survey that we conduct. For committee education items, in September, we will have a consent item that will be the Benefits and Services Fiscal Year Accomplishments Report. It's a compilation of our service performance objectives and in this case, some changes that you will see forthcoming, raising the bar, so to speak, on those key performance indicators of our service to members. We'll also be providing a subrogation claims overview in September. And then in January, our primary educational segment will be focusing on the customer experience, looking at where we are now, and then a look into the future in terms of what we do with the current design of our member service centers, leveraging what we've learned in terms of the past 2 years and the utilization of Zoom for both individual planning sessions and group sessions, as well as workshops, while also focusing on some of the key areas that we want to leverage the member service centers for, which are the individual retirement planning sessions face-to-face. So we want to increase the number of private office space and also look at where we've maximized adjacent space. One good example of that is the Irvine Member Service Center, where we have a 2,000 square foot facility that we can readily utilize that has state-of-the-art conference capabilities, so we can actually present to members on site and also broadcast it as well, webcast.
So do it like a hybrid
Approach. So we are currently engaged in a 5-year plan to revisit our 5 largest member service centers as leases come due, and where we feel it is prudent, look at where we can realign that to a new concept that to some extent increases the number of private offices, but instead of incorporating several thousand square feet of space for conferences inside the facility, have them in adjacent facilities at a much lower cost. First of which is going to be the Santa Clara facility. We're currently doing some tours in the Oakland area for a new site. So that'll be in January, and then in May, we'll actually be looking at a contact center overview. So while we have been doing pretty well in terms of our customer service interface and our customer service satisfaction from members, we are looking to raise the bar on a number of measures forthcoming in the next fiscal year. So we'll be presenting on that. 5 of 6 of our service performance objectives will be increased. And then we're also looking at an opportunity to revisit our current platform for telephony, where we may have flexibility in changing out some of the components that we currently use for quality assurance and workforce management. By the end of this year, we will have an option to either extend our contract in a series of 3 one-year contracts, at the end of which we would need to revisit by way of an RFP if we want to stay with our current telephony platform, which is Genesis, or potentially look at avenues that may be better suited to our future needs. And then one of the other things that we're going to be looking to explore and most likely implement is skills-based routing, which we currently do not have. So as a for instance, if you have, contact centers by their nature have a higher percentage of turnover than other areas. It's our entryway into the agency, and we have a lot of individuals that will move from the contact center within the first few years into one of our other divisions. Unfortunately, the way we have calls routed right now, it's the first available individual that receives calls. So by way of incorporating skills-based routing, we can take newer contact center representatives that don't have that level of knowledge and send the easier call types to them, and then use our more tenured associates to handle the more complex calls.
I want that in my life. Can I send the hard questions to Ken and I'll take the easy
So does
ones?
that mean when the caller comes in, what do you want to talk about? And then you press a button and then you'll be routed to the appropriate
Right.
person?
We would have in effect, that would require us to revisit our current IVR, our user interface that sends the calls in. And the other piece of it that we're looking to do is potentially put the customer service contact center as the centralized point of contact. So right now we have, in a couple of our other divisions, mini contact centers, if you will, where calls go if it's a specialized type of request, such as service retirement, disability, or survivor benefit. Our goal would be to have a centralized area where, based on our current model, we have about a 30-second average speed of answer. So if a member needs to talk to someone, they're going to be able to reach someone relatively quickly. And we don't have the capability to have that type of staffing in our other divisions that are not set up as contact centers. So what we're looking to do is have, by way of having skills-based routing, have individuals that have a higher level of expertise to be able to address questions that are specific to one of those areas that I mentioned. And if they need to get additional information to provide an answer or an update to a member or a beneficiary, they would be a liaison of sorts that would get the information and then be the single point of contact. So they would have ownership of that inquiry and make an outbound call with the member, as opposed to the anyone can help you type of approach. It's a best practice typically to have skills-based routing. Because of the size of our contact center, we originally did not have that model in place. We also had some limitations by way of the platform version that we have. So at a minimum, we are looking to augment our current telephony platform to the most recent version, but we are exploring alternatives to the platform as we approach that time where we're going to have an RFP.
Progress.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And then finally, in terms of the governance piece, in May of the following year, we'll have input on the 2023-24 committee work plan, as well as a review of the committee charter.
Okay. Ms. Bradford, you had a question?
Yeah, are you finished?
Yes.
Okay, I want to wait until the end. Thank you. You answered several of my questions already. One thing we had talked about a few years ago, and after hearing the research that most people tend to go to mycalstars.com and on the internet, are we anywhere close to adding an app yet into our work plan and looking at what that would take? I can see so many uses for it, and I think probably everyone in this room does their banking on their phone now, so it might be time.
Yes, we are looking in terms of the 3-year strategic plan to look at technology improvements for benefits and services. So that would be one area that we would be looking to explore. Originally, some of these were contingent or to some extent dependent upon us first finalizing our new pension platform. Of course, there's obvious, as we were discussing earlier, some delays with that regard. But to the extent that we can look at some of the other technology innovations, one good example, it's not an app, but it's using software to further find opportunities for raising the level of skills of the staff that interact with members, and that is speech analytics. Speech analytics takes the limited amount of quality assurance staff that we have to review engagements with our members and finds the needle in a haystack, so to speak, that we would not have otherwise found. And it uses everything from elevated tone in either the customer service representative or the member, which is a red flag of sorts, keywords. There's some software that will actually evaluate entire calls. I have not yet worked with an organization that has leveraged it, but it has been around since 1996, so it's not new technology. So that's one of the areas that is on the wish list for our leadership team and in the customer service division that we'd be exploring. And it's going to be dependent upon the quality assurance software that we use. But apps are definitely on the radar.
On the radar.
Yes.
Okay. And I just have two other things that I promised I would mention. I know that we've been looking at some of these things, but we really need to always be mindful of start times of our workshops. Sometimes they're just a little bit too early, people are finding in the afternoon to actually get to. And then the other one is, since we're doing so many things virtual, maybe adding some more Saturdays. So I just wanted to make sure that was on your radar.
Okay, we will certainly add it.
Got my list.
Okay. So, oh, wait a minute. Can I just add one more thing? Then, so Denise, you were saying that the app, could it be just as simple as a notification or something like that?
We were talking earlier, because one of the things is people still don't know to look for their report card. So that would, one easy thing to do was be through notifications, say, oh, they're ready. And, that might help.
Right, yeah.
I think it's a never-ending battle, but.
I could see opportunities to leverage the app, which would probably be applicable to an iPad as well, where you could do a number of other things, like once we have that capability, real-time retirement benefit calculation. I think
that'd be great.
Yeah, and scheduling potentially as well. So we will partner with our friends in technology services to explore opportunities.
Technology. All right. Ms. Miller, you had a comment?
Yeah, just a quick one, and it sounds like we're doing it already, and thank you for all of that. But I just wonder, as we look to like governance and aligning all of our different committees with the strategic plan, if we could, in the work plan, just make sure that every piece we're doing kind of aligns back directly, so we have sort of that through line. That would be great. That's it. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
And then I just have one more comment. When we talked about earlier the death benefit adequacy study, information, research, where were you supposing to put that in the work plan?
We were looking to provide that update potentially at a client advisory committee meeting.
Okay. Does everybody know what that is? No. Okay, can you kind of tell us?
In conjunction with our Benefits and Services Committee, we also have a client advisory committee that we provide information on. And we didn't know if there was, we were exploring whether there was sufficient material to provide a research item on that. The piece on the follow-up for the death benefit presentation, I'm confusing it with something else. That is going to be dependent upon our working with our actuarial team and with our research team. So rather than commit to a specific date right now, although I had one in mind, but obviously prior to the May timeframe for next year, I'd like to get a little bit more engagement with them as to what's going to be required in terms of work to be able to provide those recommendations.
Okay.
So,
okay.
January was the original thought that I had for that, but I'm going to wait on a specific date until I don't want to commit for them until I've had that opportunity for us to engage.
But we'll know by July when this is finally, when it's finally adopted.
Yeah. Okay, and then the client advisory committee, for those that are unfamiliar with it, it usually meets right before the board meeting. And so we have different stakeholders that come to that, and then they get kind of a brief rundown and it's more than 3 minutes of a discussion, basically, to talk about different items that are on the agenda, any questions they may have, any additional information that they're looking for, things like that. So that usually happens. And it usually happens prior to COVID, we used to do it during closed session. And so, that would happen, and then board members would go into closed session. And then during COVID, we scheduled them that week, board week, but then because of the nature of being the Open Meeting Act and the requirement that only 2 members be doing that. Yeah, so we've, whoever that can join the meeting has joined the meeting, but no more than 2. So, that's how we've been doing it up until now. And the last client advisory committee meeting we had was Monday.
Yes.
Okay, so, and Diane Stanton is the one that organizes that, so if you're interested in joining that, listening, and finding out things that our stakeholders are interested in, and it's a really good conversation. Okay, all right, any questions? Any more? Okay, I don't see anyone else in the queue. Thank you, Bill. All right. Okay, so now let's go on to the charter, item number 6. I don't see anybody from the public that wants to say anything, so people will let me know, right, if there's anybody that wants to say something. Okay.
There are no members of the public.
Okay, I just want to make sure. All right. Okay, so everybody had a chance to review our committee charter. This is something we do every year. What our responsibilities are, things like that.
There were no updates to the charter.
No updates, no. So it's been this way for 2 years now, since 19. Anybody okay with that? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Gail. Go ahead.
Madam Chair,
Just, I know it's not listed as an action item, but that you sort of align with the strategic plan in here specifically, just for like the future. Because I would just hate for that to get lost, and that way when you're planning your meetings, it could be like specifically aligned to make sure that that all the benefits and services are providing. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah,
Maybe just adding a little sentence in here somewhere. You're way better at that than I, in terms of where that sentence should go.
Yeah, I think so.
But
I'm sure
alignment with the strategic plan.
Legal can help with us on that wording, right? To put it in the charter as far as aligning with the strategic plan.
I think so. Yeah, we'd be happy to give it a try, and then we'll have you edit it, of course.
All right, because this is just an information item, or no, we don't have to take action on this, so, right? Okay, but we'll just look at it, okay? Good point, thank you. Anyone else have any comments, questions? I really like the one, number 3, where we make annual on-site visits. So we didn't get to do that in the last couple of years, but I encourage you to make an on-site visit to some of the customer contact centers, member service centers, just to kind of see what they do and, just kind of talk to them and, just find out more about that. So I've been able to go to a few, but I encourage, you, when you're in the areas, to try to do that.
You could go to one tomorrow, right down the
I know,
hallway.
I've been there.
So
Remember,
you
I
can
live
check it. You should
15
walk
minutes
in there and
away.
see because that's kind of
Yeah, exactly.
similar to what
It's- Yeah, but a lot of the other ones are much bigger, as Bill said, but ours is just right, and it's, parking is easy. That's
great.
Things like that, so they want to make it easy for the members to be able to visit and just kind of see what there is. Okay, all right. All right, anyone else? Okay, I think we're good. All right, thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Okay, so Summer, number 7, review of information requests. I didn't get any, did you?
I did not.
Did anyone else get any? Just the fact that we're going to incorporate the strategic plan information.
And we'll bring that edit back for you to adopt.
Okay.
And we'll probably look at putting that in all of the charters. Does that make
Okay,
sense?
so it should be in all charters, right, probably. Okay, and so we're looking at item number 8, the draft agenda for the next committee meeting, which is going to be in September. So we have to wait a little bit. Location to be determined. Anything else that you want to speak on that? Oh, Bill, I should have asked you. Anything else on here that we need to deal with?
No.
Okay. Nothing other than what we had on our work plan? Okay. Brian?
Just to follow up, I would add the review of the charter.
Okay. Okay. So we're going to do that in May also, but we're going to do that in September too?
Well, we're bringing back the revisions to you, so
Okay.
We would do that in your next meeting.
So that'll be in September, okay? So the revisions, we're going to look at it again, okay? Anyone else have any other thing that we want to add? Okay, anybody in the queue?
There are no members of the public waiting to speak right now.
Okay.
They're all at dinner, Karen.
Yeah.
5:30.
Okay. All right. I just want to thank everyone for hanging in there with us today. It's been a long day, and I really, really thank everyone for their attention and participation in today's meetings from start to finish. So thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, and our meeting is adjourned.